the palatable bits of the SDGs, because we think of them and think they are up there in the UN, they are not for us. So we need to break it down so that the Mwananchi can actually relate. When we talk of rights to health, when we talk of eradication of poverty, what does it mean? It means the constitutional rights in the Constitution. When we even have this BBI debate going on, what are the inputs of these groups of people here about children, about mental health, about the right to reproductive health, all these conversations put together. So I do not want to take so much time, but before I wind up, I would like to give a few people the representation who will speak on behalf of them. I'll start with HERAF, that is the Health Rights and Advocacy Forum, to make very few remarks in terms of what your organization does and how you have come here today and what is the expected output. So the person representing HERAF, can I have them here? Please clap for her as she comes to give their remarks. And after that, I'll go to the others. So thank you very much, and I look forward to a very engaging conversation from this room today so that you're able to make a difference and progress. So thank you very much and welcome. Hera, please.
Good morning, everyone. Hiya. Good morning, everyone. Much better. So as Zad said earlier, my name is Christine Ajulu. I work with HERAF as a program officer. HERAF is Health Rights Advocacy Forum. This is a national NGO. We work on issues around advocacy, specifically looking at the rights-based approach to programming, design, policy, etc. So HERAF works on 4 critical areas. That is one on the rights-based approach to programming, that is rights-based approach to health. And the first thing we look at is how do we empower communities, how do we ensure that communities and service providers and the rights holders and the duty bearers understand the concept of rights-based approach and implement it. The next is looking at advocacy around policies, that is the development of policies, implementation of policies, and follow-up. Thirdly, we look at citizen participation, that is on issues around governance, issues around setting at the national and county level. And finally, our 4th area of focus is on accountability and transparency. And specifically, how do we empower communities to be able to hold the duty bearers to account? HERAF has been engaging on issues around mental health for about 3 years now. And what we are doing, as I had said earlier, is we are looking at issues around policies. Do we have adequate policies around mental health? Do we have enough investments? And what agenda are we bringing onto the table? What kind of study or what research, what is backing up these asks? When we talk about policy, what are the gaps that we are looking at? And in that approach, we're looking at the rights-based approach towards the policy development, implementation around mental health. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to do the presentation now or?
Just do it.
Okay.
You know I had said welcoming remarks. So is it a presentation?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that is what we have been doing over the years. And one critical aspect for us is ensuring that we bring everybody onto this discussion, specifically persons living with mental health experiences, their caregivers, so that as we develop policies, so that as we talk about resources, then their voices are heard. Thank you very much.
To HERAF, I know you have a presentation later and we'll go to that, but this is just welcoming remarks and general remarks, then we'll go back to your presentation. I want to give this chance to Jay HR, that is journalist for human rights. Please, the representative to say something.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa Martha. And I will actually start from where you had left off earlier in terms of challenging us as journalists and how we cover some issues and how we report on some issues. And I will start by saying Journalists for Human Rights, the project that we have in Kenya is called Voice for Women and Girls' Rights. And what we are doing as an organization is amplifying the voices of women and girls when it comes to reporting of issues, and it's on general issues, not just gender, but gender and human rights. And one of the things that we are doing as an organization is organizing trainings for journalists on reporting of different matters, and that will, of course, include making sure that we accurately report on some of the stories that you're pointing out. I know that we have a very interesting relationship when it comes to politicians and journalists. There are days when we are bedfellows and there are days when we are at each other's necks, depending on what we actually report or we do not report. But when it comes to matters of women and girls, and especially just looking at the SDG Parliamentary Caucus, what we are trying to really push are some of the issues that are affecting us on a day-to-day basis. And I'll also start with how our women are getting affected in newsrooms, because we have so many cases of female journalists who get harassed within newsrooms. Those are some of the issues that we are looking at, and basically trying to look at an approach or trying to look at a way in which we can make our girls feel more comfortable working within newsrooms. Because at the moment you'll find that we have so many who join journalism at a pretty early stage. We have so many female journalists, but then when it comes to that elevation, going up the ladder to the top echelons of management within the newsrooms, we don't have so many. So right now, the things that we are issues are definitely GBV, mental wellness, as well as issues to do with FGM, because the president himself came out and spoke about FGM by the year 2023. So just making sure that we have enough stories that are being told about most of these issues. And of course, looking at the effects of COVID-19 on, again, how they affected both genders. And we have to keep on talking about both genders, because one of the biggest problems we've realized along the way is that most people take the gender agenda to be a women's agenda, but it's not. It's a wholesome agenda. It involves all of us, and we have to really keep on talking about it. I will say thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to working really closely with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the journalists, and like you said, it's been a very interesting relationship for politicians, and what they tell us is that it's not news if it's a dog that bites a man, but when a man bites a dog, it's news. That's why when there's a fight in Parliament, it will get more prominence than when we have done a law for GBV. So I am really hoping that this network would help to cover those very interesting and touching stories that are in Parliament, because I know we have the outlook generally for Parliament, but I think we do a very good job in terms of these SDGs, pushing the laws and pushing the policies. If only they would be given the prominence that they would deserve, I think we'll do better. So I really appreciate that we have the journalists with us here. I want to give this next chance to ESCRN, that is the East African Child Rights Network, to just give opening, just some few remarks. And note that JHR, we are also in the program for a proper presentation, so that's just opening remarks. So welcome this gentleman with a loud of applause.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa and everyone here. My name is Benedict Omilo. I work at the Eastern Africa Child Rights Network, and here we are partners with the Sdgs Caucus. There have been members, and we have done other activities before with the Parliamentary Sdgs Caucus. I really want to appreciate members of Parliament who are here, the civil society representatives and professional bodies representatives who are here. I want to also notice my colleagues who are here. I have my colleague Fresha Kagu, whom we work at the network with. Then I have my boss, I think she's around. We are hosted at the Eastern Africa Human Rights, Center for Human Rights, Each Rights. And we have Dr. Judith Olo. Hope she's with us here. She'll be having her remarks later. So our interest in this whole thing is that we are quite interested with child rights development, and particularly the implementation of the African Children's Charter. You know, every country has an obligation to report. Every party state has an obligation to report. And we link all civil society organizations working with rights or working with improving or developing children's agenda into the processes, into the continental processes. For those who would like to join these regional and continental and global processes, we are here to link you up. Advocacy around human rights will link you up to the Commission, will link you up to the committee also, and we carry out a lot of advocacy around implementing the child rights here. I'm particularly looking at what are some of the legislations that have been passed on regarding children, up to down there at the county. A lot of things are amiss, say at the county, but at the national level we can talk good of the policies, but we still have challenges, as we'll see later perhaps in our submissions on the budget and also on the Children's Act, which has, you know, it was almost stalling. But I want to appreciate those who have been in this process, and Waheshimiwas who have been silently and loudly advocating to ensure that we have this act coming back to the floor of Parliament. So I really want to appreciate and expect that we are going to have good deliberations, and may God again bless us all. Thank you.
Asante sana. I want to give this chance now to Mtoto News. Yeah, just 1 minute as we head to the proper presentation.
Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Jennifer Kaberi. I'm CEO, founder of Mtoto News. And I'll say we exist to amplify children's voices, ensure that children are not left out in conversations like this. Like now we are live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. This conversation, because we believe it's a very important conversation that needs to be known, that MP is actually speaking on important things like mental health, issues to do with children. And as someone says, my agenda is not big, my agenda is children. So I'll just bring it again to Waheshimiwas about the Children's Act. Thank you so much, Honorable Gogo. I know the late night conversation, they are actually coming out to fruitful, and thank you so much. I'll be speaking later about the Children's Act and the Social Workers Bill later in details. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mtoto News. I want to give this chance to Dr. Gogo to say one word. I know you have also been involved with the legislation that is on the floor of the House, just to give some remarks. And please appreciate this gracious lady from Rangwe. I say that because many people say there are many women in Parliament, but out of 290 constituencies, we are only 23 women. That is not even 10% out of 290. So for you to be elected in a constituency, it is not an easy fight. And I know when we have more female voices in Parliament, then the agenda is passed even easier. So welcome, Dr. Lillian Gogo.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. I think people are getting tired earlier than expected. The meeting must have started late because the indication was that we start at 8:30. I was here shortly after 8:30, and I realized there are people who came earlier. But the time that we start is God's time. Allow me to excuse myself. I'm a bit taken ill. If you see me leaving, it will not be because I'm a muheshimiwa. You know, waheshimiwas don't stay in functions. But I'll be taking leave to see a doctor, and then I come back. Is it allowed? Yeah, I'm a bit unwell. When Martha came to sit next to me, I asked her one question, because from the orientation that I have, I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's rights and on anyone's feet. I just asked her a simple question. I thought you come from Mount Kenya. Martha Wangare, I thought you were, allow me to use the language Kikuyu, because I expected Martha to be a Kikuyu. And I actually know she's Kikuyu, and everyone else who's been coming here have really spoken very good English and powerful English, and Martha is one of them. So I want to really speak a lot on English, because so that we can balance it. Do you allow me? And when I come here, I come ostensibly to sit down and listen. Because the brains that are gathered here and the work that people are doing outside there, I always prefer that when I go to a function, I sit down and listen and take notes. I literally sit down and take notes and enrich my knowledge. So I want to appreciate all of you who have come here today. Thank you so much, Imelda. You've been running this with your team for parliamentarians, and you have included other organizations. I thank God for your networking skills. Where is Imelda? She has very high networking skills. We appreciate you. But I would request the caucus members, Parliament caucus on SDGs, where are you, please? The staff. Kindly remind members, because a member of Parliament would commit, and if you don't remind them, they rarely come, because they get engagements that make them run up and down. So I remember Honorable Ken Okoth would call us and mobilize us from France when he was unwell and remind us that there is a meeting. So kindly be making an effort, because there were more than 30 members who registered to come for this particular function. I know maybe some of them are still coming, but most of them are engaged, because today is a fumigation day for Parliament. And having said that, I'm just curious. I have a lot of curiosity on matters health, mental health, rights, advocacy, and I've just been curious about family breakdowns and mental health, and the place of the child. Decisions are always made on the best interest of the child. And I want to thank God for the bill that we are bringing up in Parliament, that includes, among other new things, what is meant by the best interest of the child. Because this is left to the courts to decide what is in the best interest of the child. And more often than not, it will depend on the sensations that particular judge or magistrate would have at that particular time. So when we talk of health rights or mental health, my concern is with children. My concern is with families. The basic societal concern that even holds Kenya together is the family. And as you realize, so many families are breaking down right now. Is it something to do with mental health? Are we having so much pressures? Anything post-COVID? Because COVID put families together, and it is at this particular time that highest level of gender-based violence was registered. And what is the effect of this particular violence post-COVID and moving forward, and on mental health and on rights? Another thing that I found very interesting, Honorable Karua went to the East African Court to still seek their rights. What is the Kenyan position on actualizing individual rights, especially in our court system? These are things that we really need to interrogate and probably bring it forth for our debate for today. And as I go to sit down, for those of us who are here and have taken the interest of Kenya at heart, I appreciate you. Why don't we all clap for each other? You may not get time to be clapped for. Thank you so much and God bless you.
Asante sana daktari. I want to confirm that even these mountain girls go to school. Tunapata kizungu lakini yenu ni ya kuzaliwa nayo. Ours is acquired. So I want to get to the presentations. But before I do that, I would like to know whether Plan International is in the house. If not, basic needs. I would like to say something for 1 minute. Then I will give to Namati. Namati, is Namati in the house? Not yet. After we do basic needs, who are our hosts there, then we will go to the presentations as has been outlined in the program, and we will ask that Heraf be ready with their presentation. I would say that we continue taking tea as we continue doing the meeting, because I know many people are engaged and would like maybe to attend to something else, so that we don't have a proper, we'll have a proper break after we do a few presentations. So please come up, basic needs, say say something for a minute, then we go to the presentations.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I think I'll keep it very brief. I'm Geoffrey Kira, and I'm from Basic Needs. As an organization, we mainly advocate on matters psychosocial disability, mental health at community level, and even youth, all vulnerable in the population. And for this specific program, we're very looking forward at how, at policy level, we're able to push that these issues that we all of us as advocates fight for at community level are able to be addressed by our leaders in Parliament. And I think it's a really it's a pleasure for us, for me personally, to be here for this specific session. Thank you.
Asante sana. I want to call up Heraf, please, with your presentation. Pigieni makofi. Ndio maana nakuja pole hivyo. Ndio makofi kwa imefika. So karibu sana to start off with the presentation.
I'm assuming that we are able to project. I don't know if Good morning once again. Sijui kama ni kuchoka, ama ni njaa, ama ni working from home. But something is a little bit heavy in this room today. Yeah, notwithstanding, I will continue. So as I had mentioned earlier, we'll look at the human rights-based approach to law and policy. Good morning. So it is a proven fact. I am the problem. I wasn't loud enough. So as I said earlier, I'd like us to look at the aspect of human rights-based approach to law and policy. And this is very specific to issues around mental health, the mental health law, the mental health policies. And I want to start by saying that looking at the representation in this room, I am not the best person to speak on this subject. So I will request that my colleagues from the civil society, whom we've been doing this with over the years, would chip in. It is allowed, but it is favor that I am doing this presentation this morning. So I want us to start by looking at what exactly do we mean by the rights-based approach. So the rights-based approach is a concept designed to ensuring two critical things, that is the promotion and protection of human rights, and this is anchored on the international standards. So the first thing I want us to appreciate is when you look at our Constitution, Article 2.6, it talks about us adopting and accepting and etc. all the laws that have been ratified elsewhere. So when you're looking at the human rights-based approach and looking it into the context of our Constitution, we are appreciating that we have started a process. So by design, it centers human rights holders and corresponding states' obligation at the focal point of law and policy development and implementation. What is the role of the duty holders? What is the role of the rights holders? How can we bring these two together to have a discussion? And I think this is why we are having this discussion today. We know the role of the Parliament, and how do we bring the communities, how do we bring citizens into this decision-making process so that their voices are heard and their concerns are taken on board. So the critical objectives of the rights-based approach is one, it empowers the right holders to claim and exercise their rights, and two, it strengthens the duty bearers to have the obligation to respect, promote, and fulfill. So how do we ensure that the rights that we have as individuals are protected, are promoted, are fulfilled? How do we enjoy the full rights as stipulated in the Constitution and as stipulated by other policies? So when we are looking at the principles of the human rights-based approach, we are looking at something called the panel. So the first P is participation. So how do we ensure that people participate? The slide before. I can see now we are able to see from both ends. The slide is talking about the objectives of the rights-based approach. Then we are looking, thank you, then we are looking at the principles of the rights-based approach, and we've said we look at a component called the panel. So when looking at the panel, the P is participation. So one, everybody is entitled, and this is very vibrant and clear in our Constitution. So how do we ensure that people are able to participate? How do we empower individuals to participate? This morning we were talking about issues of information. How do we ensure that one, the information is available, two, the information is packaged in a way that we are able to use it? And I'm trying to look at a scenario where I'm not able to read and write, but you're giving me a pamphlet to read and participate in a discussion. So how do we ensure that this information is user-friendly, is looking at the various needs of the community? Number two is accountability, and accountability is looking at drawing the state obligations on human rights, the ones we talked about, the promotion, the fulfillment, and the protection. So how do we ensure that we are accountable? If we say we will do ABC, how do we ensure that we do it? How do we ensure that citizens, communities are enjoying these rights, how do we ensure that we report and feedback to them and protecting their rights? We are looking at the aspect of non-discrimination. And one example that I like giving is in the attempt to seek services. Because you're a human being, you have a right to health, and you have a right to access health anywhere, everywhere, anytime when you need it. So how do we ensure, in the spirit of rights-based approach, how do we ensure that we do not discriminate? How do we ensure that when we are making decisions or when we are having discussions, we are bringing everybody on board irrespective? And our constitution is very categorical on issues about non-discrimination. So how do we ensure that everybody is brought on board, we are able to listen to them, we are able to take into what they are saying, and we are able to feedback in a way that we understand? We are also looking at the aspect of empowerment. For us to participate and for us to be accountable, then we need to know how. So the question is, how do we ensure that communities are empowered? Are we sensitizing them enough? Are we engaging them in a manner that they understand? Are we engaging them so that in issues that are key to them? I like what Mheshimiwa said, that each of us in this room has a critical component we are bringing on board. How do we ensure that those of us who are keen on issues around mental health are given that space, are invited into that space so that we are able to engage? And the L stands for legality. So it's just looking at ensuring that whatever it is that we are discussing under the rights-based approach is legal. And we started by talking about the Constitution and the article that is bringing all these policies, all these legislations that we have ratified at the international level. So when we're looking at the Constitution and now trying to bring it home, what does the Constitution say about the rights-based approach? And the first thing is Article 2.5 of the Constitution, and that is under the supremacy. So the general rules of international law shall form part of the Kenyan law, and that goes hand in hand with Article 2.6, where it says any treaty or convention ratified by the Kenya shall form part of the law of Kenya under this constitution. So whatever it is that we have gone and ratified and adopted at the international level, then definitely becomes part of our laws and policies under these two articles of the Constitution. So again, looking at the rights and the fundamental freedoms, it also lists the specific articles in the Constitution of what we need to. So if it's a policy that we are developing, then what does the Constitution say about issues around the human rights-based approach? So we have Article 19, we have Article 19.1, 19.2, and it goes further to list out the various issues that we are supposed to look into. And because of time, I will not go into the detail of every article, so we could mark that and just look at them at a later time. Then we move to the application of the Bill of Rights. And when we look at Article 20, the Bill of Rights, 21, the Bill of Rights applies to all law and binds all states and organs and persons. And 22 also explains it further. Every person shall enjoy the rights and fundamental freedom in the Bill of Rights to the greatest extent consistent with the nature of the right of the fundamental freedom. So what have we set out in our laws? What have we set out in our policies? And how do we ensure that individuals, communities, citizens are able to enjoy these rights? Then we also look at the implementation of the rights and the fundamental freedoms, where we have Article 21.1, we have Article 21.2, Article 21.4. So that is just looking at how do we enforce these policies? How do we enforce what we have set out to do? Then we have the enforcement of the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is a whole chapter in our Constitution. So how do we just ensure that everything that we do, the policies that we formulate, are in line with the Constitution? So that still talks about enforcement. Then we're looking at issues around equality and freedoms from discrimination, and we have Article 27.1, Article 27.2. And now I want us to focus at how do we ensure, or how do we gauge ourselves in terms of the application of the human rights-based approach in development, enactment, and monitoring implementation of mental health policies. So we have a policy in place. So what next? How do we ensure that it is in line with the rights-based approach? So the first question is, to what extent is the development, enactment, and monitoring of mental health policies and laws grounded in the international laws? So the first point is, with the aim of ensuring that uses of human rights terms align with the globally agreed upon terms. Last week I was doing an exercise at the community level, and one question we were asking is, what are some of the terms we use to refer to persons with mental illnesses? And we know them. We have them at our communities, right? Si tuko na yale majina ambayo tunatumia depending on where we come from. So the first question is it in line with the internationally accepted standards? So as we are doing an analysis of our policy, as we are doing analysis of our act, is it in line with the accepted standards? So point 2, we are asking, to what extent is attention paid to specific human rights and the principles? So RPA to mental health requires more than mentioning of human rights in a broad sense. The naming and integration of specific norms and standards will operationalize RPAs. For example, are we discriminating? When we are having discussions, are we able to bring persons with mental illnesses on board? Or will we say, hawa hata kuna kitu watatuambia? The connotations we always have and the excuses we know how to give when we are trying to justify why we need to exclude some people. So again, when we're looking at the attention to the human rights-based approach, we will look at the participation as well. Are we bringing them onto that space? Are we giving them the space that they deserve? Are we discriminating them? And if we're discriminating them, why are we doing that? Do we ensure that there is quality, affordable, accessible services? Can we list the services, or are we able to say that if you go to facility A, B, etc., within my constituency, within my ward, you're able to get services? Are they to the right standards, just as stipulated in the Constitution? And again, we're looking at the transparency. How clear are these policies to us? Do we have mechanisms where we can channel our concerns? Do we have mechanisms where we can engage? What is the space that is there for us to engage? Then question 3, we are asking, to what extent is there explicit concern, not only with the mental health outcomes to be derived from programming, but the specifics of how these outcomes can be reached? What do our mental health indicators, for example, look like? When we are getting information and we're looking at information for decision making, how are we using this information to improve the quality of services? How are we using the information to make decisions that benefit the community? Do we have the indicators in the first place? Do we have if somebody asked today, what is the status of mental health in our country? Are we able to authoritatively say where we are, what the gaps are, and where we stand? And number 4, we are looking at to what extent is there an integration of multi-sectoral response to health issues? Is mental health an issue of the health sector alone? Are there other departments, are there other sectors that are also affected? And even as we have these discussions, even as we seek to engage, how do we bring these people on board? How do we bring the other sectors on board? So that the burden is not only in one department, but we are ensuring that there is partnership, just as what we are seeing in this room today. How do we move forward and ensure that we entrench this in all that we do? So just to conclude is we need to make a deliberate effort. We don't just need to talk. Talking about it is not enough. We need to make a deliberate effort in ensuring that we live to the spirit of the Constitution. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
That is for Dr. Lillian Gogo. Even with all the titles of doctor, she's still in school. For some reason, I don't know what else you want to acquire. But thank you very much, Heraf. I want to appreciate the arrival of our chair, Honorable Gideon Ochanda, the Bondo MP. Mheshimiwa, I would like to give you this opportunity. Just come, you say hello, and you give your remarks. Just a few things before I go to the next presenter. Mheshimiwa Ochanda.
Hello. Good morning. I'm a little bit sorry. Partly I was misled, so I had to do. I went to Pan-Africa, so I had to struggle with traffic in different ways. However, let me welcome all of you to this kikao. My name is Dr. Gideon Ochanda. I chair SDG Caucus, a caucus of Parliament, and at this moment I don't think I want to belabor on issues of SDGs anyway. But the main thing that brings us here, and I want to go straight into this because I think this really should be the main direction, is in terms of when we are dealing with the issues of human rights and issues of resource placement. I think that's really the gist of stuff that is in front of us. There is a triumvirate relationship in terms of where rights are placed in the Constitution and where the duty bearers are also placed in the Constitution. Then there's an enabling place. The enablers. What is it that will enable the duty bearer to fulfill the rights that they are placed in the Constitution? I think this is the most critical thing that we have to look at as we are here. That for sure we have rights, are very elaborate, and so elaborately placed in the Constitution. We are also very certain that we have an arrangement of duty bearers, how exactly these rights are supposed to be achieved, who is supposed to be the vehicle. But besides that, there are many other things that are not listed in that Constitution that are outside, and they are basically the enabling arrangements for purposes of the duty bearer to fulfill the requirements of the Constitution in terms of our human rights. So one of these enablers is exactly the issues of policy and data. The other enabler is legislation. Another enabler is resources. So how do we want to look at all these things on issues to do with human rights? So we want to look at our human rights. If we isolate, it's a right to education, a right to clean and safe water, right to whatever and whatever. Then we trace that through to who is supposed to do it. And when we get to who is supposed to do it, then we get into how is this supposed to be done. And you realize that for this to be done, there are issues of policy, there are issues of data, there are issues of legislation, and what the core of the meeting is the issue of resources. So as SDG Caucus, my colleague members of Parliament who are here, I'm seeing 4 or 5 already, are coming forward. Like we are here through the caucus, we are coming forward to give space for all the other actors who cannot reach Parliament. Those of you who cannot get a route to the National Assembly. Those of you who cannot get a route to the Senate. We are trying to offer this caucus for purposes of, as you implement what you are doing, as you get through the issues of human rights and you realize there are gaps in policy, You realize there are gaps in legislation. You realize there are gaps that require Parliament to do. We are offering the caucus. We are placing the caucus in front of you so that this is done. You may not get a member of Parliament in an ordinary way to help you run with these kind of things, but here we are as a caucus offering ourselves that we want to do that, we want to help you, and we want to work together to see that some of those gaps are identified and some of those gaps are fulfilled, are filled, whether they are legislative, whether they are policy, and so that the enabling kind of situations are looked at. Now, the issue of resources, and that's exactly where we have the budget. Many of our organizations, I'm saying this because that is my background. I really worked with the development agencies and non-state agencies before I got into Parliament. Many do a lot, and as they do a lot outside there, they hardly parallel what they do against the direction, the direction and how the government does its things. And one of them is an issue of budgeting. You isolate a right and you say, no, for this right to be fulfilled, we have this kind of problems. And one of them is placement of resources. For example, the issue of mental health now that we are struggling with. So at what stage are you able to get that idea? At what stage are you able to get the issues of mental health covered with resources? At what stage? You may do this, you may sing it, you may do whatever happens, but there's a stage at which you must do this in the budget process. Parliament now does the budget. I hope all of you know. But Parliament does not sit down to look at the nitty-gritties that we'll need 20 pens, we'll need 40 jerry cans, no, Parliament does not do that. That is still done by the departments. All our departments do that, and all of those are consolidated into what the Treasury calls the budget, and then all these drafts is exactly what is brought to Parliament. So Parliament looks at them department by department, because we have what we call departmental committees. There's a departmental committee of health, for example. They look at all those details under health. Once they are done, they present this to the budget committee. So if we are dealing with the issue of mental health, when you as an organization under or dealing with that kind of at what point do you strike? When do you come in? I don't know whether I'm saying anything. At what point are you coming in the budget process? Right now, there is something called the BPS, Budget Policy Statement, right now in Parliament. That budget policy statement is an indication of how the budget is going to be in June. And each of the departmental committees and each of the departments of government are handling it now. So those of you who are dealing with mental health, did you know that if you are to influence how you are supposed to be placed in the budget, are you engaging with the department already now? Because if you don't, chances are that you will not. Chances are that the mental health will not have an allocation if the department or if the ministry does not take it. So I just want to say this in terms of the surface of it. But for us, agencies that are dealing in all manner of things that we are doing, those of you who are dealing with all different sides of human rights, please, once you have isolated your niche, and you are talking about issues of budget, you are talking about issues of resource allocation, get to know one, timing and the budget cycle. Who to target within that budget cycle. And I've just given you an example now. BPS is there with us today in Parliament. It's going to be there up to next week. After next week, it is gone. And when it is gone, the next BPS will be for the next financial year, 2022-2023. Yeah? So what we have now is 2021-2022. So if you don't strike now, it means it shall have escaped you. When it escapes you, wait for the next the next financial year. So what I'm trying to say is timing and proper understanding of the budget cycle. Asante sana, Mheshimiwa Martha. I don't know whether I'm in what was expected. Asanteni.
Thanks, Dr. Ochanda, and you've done well. In fact, those are the conversations we need to have in terms of where to plug in, even for these organizations, in terms of where they come in the cycle. And that should be the output of this meeting. I recognize Honorable Mheshimiwa Esther Passaris. I know we have very many engagements going on with committees. Please come and say a word. It's important. And I know you're also rushing to another committee. So please, just come up. You're supposed to be our host. Karibu sana.
Good morning. Okay, so yeah, I'm your host in the sense that I'm the Member of Parliament for Nairobi County. Wow, yeah. Let me tell you, first of all, the SDG Caucus has actually grounded me as a parliamentarian. And Honorable Ochanda couldn't have put it better. Because it basically embraces everything. Right? But now when you look at the pandemic and you think what's happening with the SDGs, what's happening with all the areas of life that need attention, were we winning? Were we actually on target? And where has the pandemic taken us? And then I'm sure all of you are sitting here, right? And I was listening to a meditation in the morning because I listened to something last night when Oprah said that if you can't find 10 minutes of your time to do something for you or to ground you, then you don't have a life. So I decided to actually take some time and listen to a meditation. It didn't make my life any better because the meditation I listened to by Sri Kumar Rao was actually saying that we are all absent in our own lives 99% of the time. Then I asked myself, if I'm absent in my own life, then who is present in my life? And then when I sit here, I'm thinking, I was actually sitting there, and when Mheshimiwa came here and told me, Esther, can you moderate the next 2 sessions? I told her I'm expected at Ole Sereni to discuss the Kenya trade relations with the UK. And the UK government were discussing it yesterday. We actually suspended it last week because we felt, is this going to be good? All these things that are happening with the ministry, the agreements, everything. At an executive level, how is it going to serve our people? How is that related to everything that we're discussing here today? You know, I mean, it's all integrated, it's all interrelated, okay? But the issues here are very important. Where you all come in, and I'll tell you, we complement each other. It's like the government, you know, the 3 stools of the government, which is the executive, parliament, the legislature, and the judiciary. The civil society and the role that you play, right? And the CSOs, the CBOs, the self-help groups, the donors, the partners, you know, the SDG 17, all of us coming together. All the roles that you play in helping us push whatever we need to push is so important. So I want to tell you that we might come in and go out, because I think like 15 of us committed to be here. Rest assured, those who are not here yet, who will pitch up at one point or another today during your sessions, are very much committed to helping us all attain something as citizens of this world, not even Kenya. Because whatever we do here is important for the entire world. What I would really appreciate is if you can share everything that you will discuss, engage us more, all right? And then together, you know, one building block at a time, we should be able to do what we can. But the SDG Caucus holds us all together, right? And all of you that are here, honestly, give yourself a pat on the back. And I'm going to try and be present for at least an hour. Why? Because I want to really grasp what it is that we want to do with the issues that we need to talk about. Because human rights across the board is why we live. if any of our human rights are denied in whatever form or manner, then how do we go forward? And you know, when you're talking about suicide decriminalization, do you know, I actually thought about Unite, a body that I belong to. We no longer say drug addicts, we say drug users. We no longer see them as criminals because we realize that they actually need help, all right? And when somebody is trying to take their life, they have reached the end of the road. And when they've reached the end of the road and they try and take their life, and then we jail them, what are we really doing? I mean, seriously, how many of you have had moments where you just think life is worth living? I have a friend who called me 2 days ago and said, Esther, I think my girlfriend's going to kill herself. She's just fed up. And she's got 2 children. She doesn't have a husband. She's the breadwinner of the entire family. I don't even know how to help her. When I put the GBVs, when we signed up the MOU with the police yesterday to put GBV centers in all the police stations, I didn't realize at the point when we were talking about it that when you're raped or your child is defiled or you're a man who's sodomized or your son is sodomized, when you go to some police stations to report your case and it's a Friday and you're going to be taken to court on Monday and you need a safe place to be, you end up sleeping in the cells with the prisoners, with the arrested criminals. You end up in cells. Can you imagine a woman who's raped and then she sleeps in the cells? What are the conditions of the cells? We've got a lot to do. Now, should we point fingers at our government and say our government is not doing everything right? Let me tell you, every single day in America, over 20 to 50 million people sleep hungry. In spite of all the success that we say the American dream, Black Lives Matter. You would think after they were shipped out of Africa as slaves that today, when they've had a black president, a black American will feel like he belongs, and yet he doesn't. So what I'm telling you is the challenges that we have in Kenya, we will not solve them by condemning and criticizing our government. We will solve them by recognizing one fact, that the government is ours. We are the people and we are the government. So let us work together. You know, we spend so much time condemning each other and putting each other down. We've all somehow got PhDs without even having masters and bachelors. Can we, and let's pull him or her down, can we just accommodate each other? Be present to the issues that we need to resolve. And if you can take and run and solve the problem, then do it. Because, you know, I've realized something right now, that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. Let's make that human experience spiritual. Thank you and God bless you all.
Thanks, Mheshimiwa Pasaris. I don't think we are doing so badly in terms of time. We are like 15 minutes just behind of schedule, and we are doing the interjections where necessary. I want to give this chance to the journalists, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. In fact, your topic here is addressing GBV, and there's something I've been asking myself in terms of how we report GBV cases. Does it create the curiosity for people to continue doing it? And I'm saying that because yesterday, something bizarre happened. My mother called me in the morning from Murang'a, that's where I'm born and bred. And there was a case of an 8-year-old. She told me, we have spent the whole night looking for some girl, an 8-year-old. And they found her body in a tea plantation, and how that girl had been killed. Because it was not enough to just rape her. She had been defiled. Her ribs were out. That guy had actually skinned her, had removed her private parts and skinned her. And that picture, I still have it in my mind. I didn't see it, but I have it in my mind. And at night, my mom was calling me to tell me she couldn't sleep because of what they saw. But now that takes me to the media. How it was reported, my God. I think it now elicits people to actually try it? I don't know. How can we go about it? And I say that if you follow the DCI Twitter handle, they also report the bizarre, the actual details of how it was done. So I sit down asking myself, we have a sick society, really. Because I was just thinking, this girl, was it not enough to just to rape her? It was not painful enough to kill her? Did you have to go to the extent of dismembering her body? And really, it's chaotic. So I'm just thinking, even as we have the conversation in journalism, how we report these cases, does it help the situation or does it make it worse? Just an opener. So welcome to JHR to make their presentation.
Thank you very much, Honorable Martha. And, actually, the questions that you ask are part of the reason why Journalists for Human Rights is doing the work that we are doing in Kenya, because we noticed that there is a gap in terms of how journalists report on human rights issues. The conversation on human rights in Kenya has been one that has been riddled with a lot of, lack of awareness, basically, on what really human rights are and what they entail. And as a result, human rights organizations, I think Elizabeth from KNCHR will tell you, sometimes would go to certain places and instead of being welcomed because they're fighting for the rights of the community, they actually get attacked because issues of human rights have been misreported, have been reported in a way that does not really shed the light as is or should be. So for that reason, really, JHR wishes to build the capacity of journalists to be able to report on human rights issues and especially issues on gender in a more objective way. I'm going to have to remove my mask because it's preventing me from talking properly. And so, once again also, I am so glad that I get to speak after Honorable Pasaris because I feel like she's really made my presentation. I don't really feel like I have so much work to do. She's done it for me. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa. So basically, JHR, we've been working with journalists, as I've said, but also we've been working with civil society organizations. And we did a scan towards the end of last year, during the 16 days of activism. We did a research which really helped us to see the picture in terms of how gender-based violence reportage is happening in the country. And one of the things that COVID has done is that it's really shed a light on the reality of how gender-based violence is affecting Kenyans. The numbers went high. Victims were locked up in spaces where they were together with the perpetrators, and the channels of reporting, again, while they do exist, accessing them was a problem. So we come to you today because we would like, as Gideon Ochanda said, Mheshimiwa said, we would like to work with you. You know, we are called to want to provide a partnership, give our expertise in the subject and be able to work with members of parliament to find a solution to this particular problem. So basically, I'll just do a very short presentation which we'll be looking at SGBV. And as we all know, sexual and gender-based violence, obviously, is one of the complex social problems. It happens everywhere. It's happening in Kenya, it's happening in the US, it's happening all over the world. And as I said, with COVID, the realities around it were opened to all of us globally. So because of this, I would like to show some of the numbers, because one of the challenges we're experiencing is with the reporting on gender-based violence, because of the shame that is associated with the vice. Many victims, or should we call them survivors, do not feel comfortable to go and report gender-based violence for some of the reasons that Mheshimiwa spoke about. You go, you report that you've been violated. Sometimes there's ridicule coming from the police officers. There's ridicule coming from your fellow community members. There's ridicule that comes from service providers. In fact, some of the service providers will degrade you, and you end up feeling like I should have just stayed at home and solved my problem my own way. Again, also at the police stations, you find there's no expertise to be able to know how to basically assist some of this. Yes, there have been efforts by civil society organizations as well as some government institutions to build the capacity of police officers to be able to help survivors of gender-based violence, but it is not adequate from where we stand right now. So because of this, we have data, and I'm going to show you that, for example, if you look at my slide, you will see that in the month of November to December, we had a total of 11,917, just 1 month. 1 month only, we had 11,917 people reporting that they had been, violated one way or another. And out of this number, we have 246 being persons with disability. If you look at the first and second column of, the indicators, you will see that their ages there, 0 to 11 years, and you can see 12 to 17 years. Look at those numbers. We've got the highest number of children, 0 to 11, being 1,552. And you have 12 to 17-year-old, 6,709 persons reporting to have been violated one way or another. And when we talk about these numbers of children, we're not talking about them being beaten. This is not domestic violence. This is rape. Actually, this is defilement. So these numbers, to me, are enough to cause me to shudder and think about our children and wonder why our society has become so torn such that, we have to violate this great number of children. But put together again, you can see that, the other problem is, look at the lower row. We have the number of survivors that have been seen, rape, and others who presented other injuries. There was just 8,916. Those are the ones who felt like they wanted to go to report and get seen by doctors and other service providers. So in the month of January 2020, which is just the other month, again the number of survivors is again rising. Well, not as much as it was in November to December, but we have 1,458 persons reporting violence. Now, I say that this is fragmented data. The reason is because we have so many others that haven't reported. When journalists reported on the number of teenagers that had fallen pregnant during the pandemic, there was no one who could tell us the actual number, because there are some that were hidden in our families, some that never chose to come out and say, I have been violated. There are those who never fell pregnant, but they still got violated one way or another. And remember, they didn't. So we assume that this number could be more than double because of the lack of reporting. And, this now brings me to the core of my presentation. I do see a problem because currently in Kenya we have only one public, I choose to call it public, I will not call it government. We've got only one public safe house, which was established in Makueni by the county government towards the end of last year. We do not have other shelters that are publicly owned or that draw resources from the public. What we have are privately owned shelters, and they too do grapple with constrained resources as well as limited spaces. So they can only hold a certain number, a limited number. They can't really cater to the, let's say, 15,000 survivors that we had in November and January, or November, December, January this year. So because of that, we feel like there is a gap that speaks to the safety and security of the survivors, especially children. And Honorable Pasaris has painted a very vivid picture. She's told you about how people are held in police stations. Imagine you have been violated, and you can't, there's nowhere that you can go that is safe. You have to stay in a police station, where that is where you're told that you will be safe and secure. But as I say, we know of police stations where further violation happens, so you get violated again, even though you were a victim before you came to that police station. Children who are victims of gender-based violence also end up in the same police cells, or they go to juvenile detention centers where they're held with other children who are in conflict with the law. So that kind of interaction, the trauma that is associated with this kind of keeping of persons, children included, is what causes us to want to speak to you, and I'm glad that today's meeting has a conglomeration of other stakeholders, because the issues we speak to also do extend to issues of mental health. Mtoto News is here. When we talk about the violations to children, I'm sure Mtoto News is interested in working with JHR to find a lasting solution to this problem. So I'm really glad that we have this kind of gathering today. So for us, we are asking that, what we are asking for is that there are shelters that are built by the government using government resources and are resourced by the government to be able to hold these people who are survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. These ones will provide an improved system for survivors to find support, and they will also help us to ensure that all the gender-based violence programs are set up in a sufficient way so that there is enough funding to be able to sustain this, these safe houses. So the safe spaces for us, what we envision, will be spaces that will cater to women, to girls, and children. So children here includes both boys and girls. And we are also opening up to ensuring that even male survivors of gender-based violence can be attended to in these safe spaces. And we see the impact that having these safe spaces can have in society, not only in just reducing the cost, but also in ensuring that there is, the safety of us is, of human beings basically is ensured, and it will in turn affect the productivity and empowerment of our families and communities. So we see these safe houses providing temporary stay for the gender-based violence survivors, as well as provide other services that are holistic and intersectoral. We want to have mental health care practitioners housed in those safe houses. We want doctors, we want lawyers, we want policemen, and so many others in the chain of care that will be relevant to survivors of gender-based violence housed within these safe houses so that they can be able to provide the adequate support that survivors require. And as I said previously, we are hoping that these safe houses will draw funding and support from the state, as well as other actors of goodwill. So one might, look at my presentation and say that we are painting a very bleak picture and nothing has been done so far. That is not the case. So for us, first of all, we come from a point of departure where we do acknowledge that the government in itself has done a lot of work in terms of addressing gender-based violence. We've got laws that have been developed, legislations have been enacted that that talk about the prevention and support of persons who have gone through gender-based violence. We have seen gender-based violence recovery centers set up in major hospitals, in certain police stations, and others set up just outside of any of these two institutions. We've also seen the government entering into partnerships with non-state actors, whereby they've undertaken measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. I think towards a few years back, we also had a conglomeration of organizations coming together, including the UN, the government, the ministry, and coming up with a policy that was supposed to guide up the setting up of safe spaces for gender-based violence victims. So that is one of the things that we would like to have a discussion with, because the framework exists. It's just about seeing how that can then be legislated upon, or how we can be able to push for it to be enacted, to be implemented, so to speak. Then we have polycare centers also that were set up towards the end of last year. And of course, we will not forget Mama Pasaris's efforts yesterday when she launched the police units, which will again play a role similar to what we are proposing here. But because of the issues we pointed out to, we would like for these safe houses that will be set up to be independent of the institution of the police, even though they will be including the police in the chain of service provision. So, what will be the role of this parliamentary caucus in helping us with this? We are coming from a point where we do realize that the Constitution has, the Constitution of Kenya, alongside our international commitments and obligations, as well as the various laws and protocols that we have here in Kenya, as well as also national policies that are designed to ensure that we have implementation and other proper management of gender-based violence, and that Parliament has a role to play in coordinating both public, private entities and community leaders in implementing the legislations and policies towards prevention and response to gender-based violence. So we are looking also at the caucus's common goal of ensuring that there is an effective implementation of all the 17 sustainable development goals. We know that gender cuts across all the 17. We will not attempt to make gender a standalone, goal that possibly needs attention by itself. And that's why, again, I say that it's good that we have the representation we have here, because our issues, gender issues, do cut across. So we see that as one of the areas, or rather, because of the goal of the caucus to want to implement all of them, we would like to impress upon the caucus then to push for the implementation of the policies that have been set up, so that we can have safe houses set up by the national government across the country. And when I say across the country, I do not mean that I want safe houses set up in all the 47 counties. I do not want 47 safe houses. In fact, if I can have 5, I'd be happy, because setting up 47 means that we want to normalize violence against women or gender-based violence, so to speak. What we're looking at is ending or eliminating gender-based violence, but also we want to have structural whatever that looks at how gender-based violence can be addressed adequately. So for us as the journalists for human rights, we would like to render ourselves to offer technical expertise and guidance to the caucus, as well as other stakeholders who would like to join us in this quest. And also, apart from speaking about the safe houses issue, we would like to flag other gender concerns that can be prioritized by the caucus. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Now, things have changed. Things have changed. Martha dashed out. And I'm requested to step in. And I'm going to step in this manner. I think we've had 2 presentations. We needed some response. We needed some issues around them. Then we also still have 2 presentations. So I wanted to call for your indulgence that we don't break for tea, but we can have tea at the personal level. Yeah? Yeah, you can take tea at your own personal levels of demand. And then somebody needs to be sanitizing this. Yeah? I'm reminded that COVID is still with us. So, sorry if you didn't get what I was saying. One is that Martha dashed out, and she was the one who was moderating the sessions that we've had, so I've stepped in. 2 is that there are 2 presentations that have happened so far, have taken place, and we really want to open them up for discussions. And then 3, that we have personalized tea. We have personalized tea, so the break is not going to be as open as it ought to have been. But you'll pick tea based on your personal demand. When you need it, pick it. When you don't, you pick lunch. Now, then the next, they are my colleagues, and I want you to bear with us. This is going to happen, and it will keep happening until we leave this place. We were expecting a number of members of Parliament, I think over 10. They'll be coming in. Many will not be staying in for long. So allow us as they come in from time to time. We just recognize that they are there. And I want to start with identifying our speaker, Chris. New permanent benefit.
Chris Omulet, member of Parliament Rwanda, and I'm a member of this caucus. I am here until it's done.
Very good.
All about.
Now, Chris is our speaker. Chris is our speaker in the National Assembly. And every single time you talk to the speaker, many of the agents know what that means. Yeah? It's not very easy to get the eyes of the speaker. Yeah? And when you get the eyes of the speaker with your issue, then you're good to go. Then Pity. Honorable Pity is also here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Beatrice Nyaga, Member of Parliament for the Community County, and I'm a member of this caucus, and a founder member, in fact. We started this one sometime, that was the beginning of this Parliament. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Beatrice. Now, I think those are the two members who have joined us so far. I'll be recognizing those as they come in. If you agree with me, we have a short discussion around the two presentations. Then we do the next round of two presentations. And I think that's going to be it. But as we are doing this, I think we need to remember a number of things. Number one is, what did we want to achieve with this kind of meeting? So when we are asking questions around what was presented by Christine, as we ask those questions, please remember, Christine was handling the issue of human rights-based approach in regards to mental health policy and legislation. So as that happens, are we able to isolate very clearly when we're dealing with the issue of policy? What is amiss? What is the gap? When we're dealing with the legislation, what is amiss? What's the gap? Say that by the end of the day, we also have a conclusion in terms of if these are the gaps, if these are the weaknesses, what do we do with them? How do we move forward with them? I didn't have the advantage of listening through to Christine's presentation. And I can't even identify where, in the middle, where is she? Where's Christine? Very good. Very good. So I didn't have the advantage of listening through to Christine's presentation, but I think whatever done or halfway done. But I've had the advantage of listening through to meetings. So I want to open this up. Those of us who have any comments, a question, or a comment on what was presented by the two presenters. Can we start with one, then we go to the next, or we just let it be as, yeah? Let it be as it is. So one raises whatever. But mention that you're doing it for Christine or for Winnie. Okay. Can I see the hands again? Why did I start with the hands of those that know Roy? Okay.
Thank you so much. It's been a learning moment for some of us. But now I want us to get a little bit practical. I work at the county level, and I work with several counties. And the one emerging thing as we discuss this aspect of shelters and rescue centers is, one, how should they look like? As we propose policy changes, we need also to provide models. One economist at a county level who is in charge of treasury asked me, Eva, are you asking for a boarding school or an empowerment center? Yes, I can give space. Space is available. But how should it look like? Are we just going to keep women somewhere for them to attend court and then get out? Or what else are we proposing? That was very key. Then the other bit was the sustainability. Who has the responsibility of sustaining the shelters or the rescue center? What do we want to see? How long do we want to have them? Then how are we going to work through with communities so that the attitude changes? I'm from Western Kenya. If you are isolated because you underwent violence, then it is the responsibility of the government to deal with you. Coming to reintegrate becomes a challenge. So how are we going to work with communities around that? Then the other bit is that one asked, Eva, is the rescue center an idea or a place. In France, it was an idea such that hotels took over. Women would go to the hotels and raise an alarm, and the hotels would protect them. So do we move beyond just having a physical place, or do we find ways of communities also integrating these ideas within communities by strengthening what used to be there in the past? In some communities, like Northeastern, we rescued a young girl from early marriages during the COVID pandemic. And I'll tell you, some of us had to go undercover. Politicians, police officers from that community cared for us. And we felt like, how would it look like for us to build a shelter in this community? It would be bombed. So what alternatives do we have besides rescue center? That is number one. Number two, as we work at county level, everyone is pushing for budgeting along the lines they feel needs to be responded to. And I'm starting to ask myself, if we push budgets around mental health, GBV, children, youth, single-handedly, then how will the budgeting look like? Is there a chance for us integrating these aspects also? For example, those who are handling GBV, we ensure that every GBV program comes with a mental health component in it. If you're working with children, you make sure that every program around children comes with a mental health component in it. If you're working with the elderly, you make sure that it comes with a health component in it, a mental health component in it, such that when you're doing, for instance, sensitization, you have a health stand or something that allows communities to be attended to along the needs of mental health and GBV. Because the reality is there will not be resources for every single strand of what we need to attend to. And that's where you find that some issues are put at the periphery, some are prioritized. So those are my thoughts. I tend to be a very practical person because during implementation, as we work with counties, some of these questions are asked by those who need to budget. Some of these things are brought back to us to think through them. So it's easier to raise them, but we may want to think through them to the end. How should they look like? Thank you.
Very good. Don't go far. There's a hand here.
Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, for just allowing me to raise my concerns. And first of all, I'd like to appreciate the two presenters. They did an amazing job bringing in the data and the situation at hand. And first of all, my name is Nikrina Diambo. So passionate about gender-based violence and SGBV. And I'd love to raise my concern from a community perspective in this sense. The past 6 months, I've handled 2 cases which really drained me. I looked at the second presentation, which brought in data of the reported incidences of violence, more so against the minors, and it triggered that the 2 incidences, which the latest was yesterday. And these 2 incidences were issues of sexual gender-based violence against minors by the perpetrators were biological parents. And the latest one was yesterday, and this 12-year-old who suffers from cerebral palsy was violated, is currently pregnant, and the father is working scot-free in Majengo here in Nairobi. Why am I bringing this to our attention today? We are talking about shelters and rescue centers. The girl is currently hosted in some private shelter in Eastlands. And number one, she cannot access justice right now because you're talking about policies, and I'm bringing the aspect of resources into play. She cannot access justice because there is need for DNA evidence. Number one, this is child who has mental health issues. She's a child who's not in a good capacity. Of course, number one, she cannot make decisions on her own. She's a minor. the question of justice. How can such a person access justice when there's the request of having a DNA done to get, her to access justice? Number two, the shelter I am talking about is a very small personal house which hosts currently over 20 girls, survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in the slums in Nairobi. But these kids do not have a mental health space, like even that therapy to help them go through the process, to help them fight the process. Some are even suicidal. They're like, they've given up. They've given up on justice, they've given up on the community. And I think Mheshimiwa mentioned, the stigma that comes from the community and the service providers. How at a policy level, and I'm so happy that policymakers are in the room today, how do we have conversations, even as you're talking about children, mental health, and gender, and even gender-based violence? Number one, that's my question with regards to that concern. Number two, resources. Having that only one public shelter facility is in place right now. How do we even decentralize this? How do we ensure even every sub-county has a home? Because I can tell you right now with facts that the cases I handle every other single day of gender-based violence and sexual gender-based violence, not only against the minors, but even of adults, is really alarming. The cases are going unreported. And when reported, they just fall under the cracks because they say, hakuna kitu inafanyika. Waiting for the court process is a disaster. So number one, how do we have conversations around policies back in the community, because these things are happening in the communities that you're working in and the communities that you're living in, and how can the resources be allocated to ensure that the survivors at least have access to therapy, have access to medical systems. Thank you.
Okay, your hand. Someone have a hand there? Those are the only 3 hands I saw. Is there another one? Okay. So that will be last.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I want to start by appreciating the presenters. I have 2 questions. To the first presenter on human rights approach, I just want to know if the human rights approach debate is open up to policies that concern drug users. Because for us, it's a big issue. The drug users, the criminalization and lack of access to healthcare, that's a big issue for us. It's something that we've been talking about. We are aware there's a bill in Parliament that probably may not go into our favor. We are looking at a harm reduction bill, but we are still there. The second question is the sexual and gender-based violence forum. Is it open up for women who use drugs and men who use drugs? Is it open to trans women? Is it open to the LGBTQ? Because these are the populations that are usually left out. During COVID, we've dealt with a lot of gender-based violence issues in the slums against women who use drugs. And we have had to improvise. We have had people using money from their pockets to make sure that they're surviving. So are these spaces open up to the key populations that we are talking about? Number 3, are we able to use collaboration tools in this platform? Because if you are doing something on sexual gender-based violence, and I'm working with drug users, female drug users, and somebody else is doing a human rights approach, do we have a collaboration point? Because we definitely have a convergence point, but do we have collaboration too, so that I don't have to replicate what you're doing? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good morning. I want to first thank the presenters as well as the organizers. And just to say that I think it's really gratifying that there is a focus and attention to the critical 2 issues of mental health as well as gender-based violence, which have in the recent 1 year become so amplified. And having interacted with issues mental health, just to say that my name is Maslin Nyambala, the Executive Director, Association of Media Women in Kenya. We come in also partners of Journalists for Human Rights with the heart of also journalists as well, but also very, very passionate about gender issues in the country. Looking at mental health and having interacted with some of the psychiatrists, you find that case consultation is as high as 3,500. And most of the services are within Madari for any ordinary Kenyan. And even consultation in Madari, the price is very high for ordinary Kenyans. And we are looking at the situation where we are at as a country. And you find also the shelters and every issue around survivors. And you realize that the resources supporting survivors are very inadequate. So in terms of just, especially budgeting around mental health, and just trying to see that communities have support, medical institutions, I know generally our health sector is facing a lot of challenges. Of course, we have made a lot of progress with the NHIF and access to universal health. But now, going forward, what do we think as in terms of direction with regard to budgeting for mental health so that we can have it more accessible? I think going by the presentations by the two presenters, the issue of access, affordability, participation, how do we improve the budgeting and how do we work together, parliamentarians and the people present here today. And those shelters, I know we've had this conversation with Winnie, and I was glad she talked about it. I completely do not support 47 shelters because that one is just saying that as a nation we have given up and we're just going to be having a lot of violence. But looking at perhaps 8 or up to more than 20 shelters that are accessible. But how do we work with the counties and national government and see that next time we are also not just talking about these issues, and I know Honorable Chanda talked about it, that if we have not been engaging with the budget process by now, maybe we have missed the current cycle. And how do we plan better so that we ensure that we are able to pick changes and by next budget cycle we are able to design, and I like her question, how does that shelter look like? How long will the women stay there? Is it the format of it? And she's talking about the private shelters, that there is adequate resources. The people who are there, it's a private person, they've offered themselves, but maybe they don't have enough food, they don't have enough personnel there, they don't have enough expertise. How do we work and ensure that even these private shelters are supported? Thank you very much, and I look forward to the outcomes of the meeting.
That was supposed to be my last, but that was supposed to be last. But because of gender issues, I was trying to bring the mic to our speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chanda.
I'll reverse the agenda, the way people know
Yeah. we hope that with time it will be a reflection of the nation, the way it has gone about here, that the fair agenda. Is it really fair? Will be the majority in most of our undertakings as a society. Mine really is not to reduce from what the conversation is so far, but just to voice my music, because it is true that we have all this violence, gender-based violence in our society, in our homes, in our counties, in our nation. But my worry is the perpetrators of these ghastly and nefarious activities. When you look at them, And I'm saying this coming from a background of having practiced law and also having represented people who have been abused in the courts. My concern was always the perpetrators. When you look at these people, they are very disturbed people themselves. And when you find them in this situation, and those who actually get arrested and presented to the justice system, they are treated very badly, really. And they are perpetrators. Of course, we have all this array of offenses and penalties that we met out to them. But these people, really, these are mental cases. And when we take these people and we charge them, and sometimes we plead guilty, and we find them guilty, and convict them to 30 years, whatever number of years, and we throw them into these prisons, are we really helping ourselves? Because at the end of the day, I think the society must move along as a whole society. Even these perpetrators are members of the society. So the causes that send these people to do the things that we find to be totally unsocial and criminal should be looked into. So the solution should be wholesome, so that the perpetrators of these terrible crimes and social injustices to our children and to our society, we should be able to find a way to cure it, so that the solution is wholesome. Am I speaking sensibly, or am I trying to defend the indefensible? Maybe. I just want the conversation to be there, so that they are also part of the society. If we do not deal with them, if we do not find a cure for them, they will come back to societies. So are we helping ourselves or not? That is the conversation I'd like to have. And members, I would just like to ask you to kindly, as Chair said, COVID is still with us, and it is, as a representative of the people, I've seen some of the victims of this terrible affliction that has come to our shores. It is not kind to the body at all. Just wear the mask. Tafadhali.
Okay. This one was based on a clear demand that the hand that was given.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ochanda. Elizabeth from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and my question is to Ms. Winnie Siomboa, and it's in relation to data. So I'm looking at our Kenya report, Voluntary National Report to the High Level Political Forum last year, 2020 report, and it reports the cases of sexual assault as 426 over a 3-year period. So from 2016 to 2019 as 426. And you presented to us data of about 11,000 in 1 month. So I'm wondering why the discrepancy in data. Is it fully related to COVID, or is it that we don't have harmonized data in the country? Because I'm just thinking it's really critical how you will react if you think you have 400 cases over 3 years, and if you think you have 11,000 cases in 1 month as a government. So just a question around the discrepancy in data. Thank you.
Okay, now, I think let's proceed. There are a number of issues that I might. I want to believe that, Christy, you picked your date, and so did Winnie. But starting from the very last comment on the issue of data. This is where we have the biggest problem. I want to believe that we may not be having the very finest data as at now. And I'm not too sure who will be having the finest data at every particular time. Because even when you're talking about these issues of safe houses. She has only Makweli. But I remember in one of the meetings, I don't know where, just within this month, I was informed there's a safe house in Kisi, and it was confirmed by Janet Ongera in that meeting. There was a safe center in Migori, Korea, confirmed by Unita Agati. And that's just in terms of where we. See now, those of us who are here, who have listened to Winnie's presentation, now are only clear that it is one. This is an issue of data. Who has data? And who has a comprehensive, composite, up-to-date data on some of these things? So I may be surprising even Winnie now that there is a safe house in Kisi, there's a safe house in Korea, and I want to believe there's another third one. I can't just remember. But they are there. Now, again, that goes with a comment that you may not want to have them in order for 7 counties, for example. I may want to look at it in the reverse myself. Why do you need them? So if, for example, Tharaka Nithi, where Mheshimiwa Beatrice represents, some parts of that Tharaka Nithi, yeah? And assuming that there's no safe house, that was the headquarters. Chuka Gamamombe. And the other extreme end, I remember going to, I don't know where, somewhere closer to Garissa. So if something happens there, and even Chuka Gamamombe, who is in Tharaka Nithi, doesn't have a safe house, and they have to go to a safe house in Embu, what does that mean? So I'm just trying to look at the idea that we're saying, no, we may not even need for 7. Yeah, I would rather look at it that we need them in every police station, for example. If it were me, yeah, I would rather talk about having them in either under every OCPD or under every OCS, such that they are somewhere, because we're talking about the victims, we're talking about, many times there are these issues of children who are found randering, yeah? You can't identify where they are from and whatever. Where do you take them? So there are some of those things that I think, as we comment, we may want to look at the issue of data. Then there's the issue that the speakers brought about. Yeah, and you connect this with like an incident that was being presented here from is it Starehe or Starehe? You know, she was talking about DNA. At what stage do we want to talk about DNA in a justice process? You want to talk about DNA even at this time round, that things are so fresh. There is a victim, there is a small little girl, and then there is what's said to be a father, scot-free. Is that the stage you want to talk about that? Or do you want to talk about the initial processes, such that by the end of the day they culminate into what's called DNA? If we start getting very worried about DNA in the beginning, before the first little processes, what's really happening? So I think I'm trying to look at that against what our speakers bring around, in the sense, where is really the problem? The problem could be with the mental psyche of these people. Can we have a situation where a situation like that, some of the people we call victims or perpetrators, are first subjected to a mental check before we go the police way? Just a thought. Can we be doing that? Because definitely, like what was presented here by Martha, that was happening in Murang, what's presented here that's happening in Starke. There are things. There's definitely something that the perpetrator, the person is looking out for. Yeah? And we don't know what this thing is. And that's the thing that maybe is talking to his mental side and ends up in a situation like that. So as we respond, I think I'll just try to bring those also as my own concerns. Let's have Christine. Christine? You can wherever you are.
Okay, thank you. I think most of what was raised were comments and might really not need responses. But I'd like to pick on something on the budget that was raised by my colleague from the counties. And her question was, do we need separate budgets for everything? And I think this is a discussion that has been going on from time to time. And we are talking about separate budgets, and we are, or dedicated budget lines, as we like calling it in the civil society. And we are talking about integration of services. So the question really is, what do we want? Do we want to integrate services? And when we integrate services, for example, when we integrate mental health services, what does it look like? What should we be looking at when we're talking about integrating services? The other thing is, when you look at mental health, I'm sorry, I'm talking from what I do. So when you look at mental health, most of it is anchored on NCDs. So under the NCD budget line, are we able to clearly say that this is what was meant for mental health, or this is what was expended under mental health? There is that lump sum, yes. But how do we track these resources to ensure that there is improvement of services, to ensure that we have quality of services? Because I don't think it's all about having standalone budgets, but it's at the end of it all is, are the services accessible? Are the services available? And what is making us glamorized other programs over the rest? So how do we, as a mother, ensure that every child gets a banana when they are few? So the integration way is the way to go, but are we able to track? Are we able to trace these resources? Are we able to improve services based on what is already available? There is a comment that was raised by the chair when he was giving his opening remarks on how do we engage in the budget process. And I think over the years, we have to admit that there has been a change. We have moved from running after the budget at the last stage to engaging the budget from the planning stage. And at HERAP, what we normally do is, we start from the mother document, that is the CIDP, and ask ourselves, what is in it for mental health? And how do we track it all the way down to the final budget for that particular year? So I think that is an area that has changed, though there is still room for improvement. Then there was another question on the human rights-based approach and sort of looking at policies from a linear perspective. And I like what she mentioned about, in the same breath, the issue of collaboration. How do we ensure that everybody here has an anchorage? HERAP is doing mental health, XYZ is doing the other thing, wherever they are. But at the end of it all, what are we looking at? We are looking at the general good of the community. So how do we collaborate? How do we anchor what we are doing? I will talk about right-based approach to mental health, policy, planning, budgeting, etc. because that's what I do. But it does not mean that all the other policies do not need the right-based approach concept or the right-based, the approach itself. So the aspect of collaboration, the aspect of partnership is very, very critical. How do we ensure that we have this particular pot where we dip on and see this organization is doing this, we have done this, how do we have that learning? So I think that is something that we should look at going forward. But yes, all our policies need to look at the human rights-based approach. Why? Because one, we are human beings, so we have the rights. And the rights say, I need to be treated first before I'm taken to court. Yes, I am a criminal, but I am a human being. I have committed a crime as a human being. So can I be treated as a human being first before all these other processes and procedures are taken on board. So yes, we need to look at every policy and how do we anchor it. And the most critical thing is the Constitution. We have the Constitution that is giving us this, an entire Bill of Rights. So how do we ensure that there is that linkage? How do we ensure that there is that wholesome approach? I think the rest were comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. If is not here ever, I think there's something that I wanted to revisit when she's around. Say that we look at it, what is it that we are looking at small things in relation to the budget? How then do we have them in the budget? Yeah? How then do we have them in the budget? I think given that she had more information, I think we'll engage her more on that. But in the meantime, we carry on. Your hand, I've seen you raise your hand. Was it on a comment by Christine or something else?
Yes.
Oh, one second, yeah. When we are into something called point of order, so when there's a comment being raised by somebody else, and you think that there's something that may miss you, or you may miss, or the competitor may miss, you do a point of order. So let's listen to this point of order.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mine is just a point of order regarding on what my sisters just talked about.
Yes.
And I feel like, thank you. I feel like it's ideas that attract money and resources. It's not resources and money calling for ideas. And that's why probably we are under this room today, so that we come with an idea that can attract money and solve all the problem that we have right now, which is gender-based violence. And therefore, the civil societies are there, they're doing a commendable job. But I tend to believe that when you're looking at gender-based violence, it's dynamic, it's not static, and it also manifests itself in very different ways. Therefore, by bringing people from different sectors and different societies, people from different parts of the country, who are also experiencing gender-based violence in different dimensions, then we can come up with an idea whereby we all agree unanimously that this is what we can move forward with, this is what needs to be ratified, and this is the way in which the legislatures can move forward with, so that that money trickles down to the common humanity and we sort out this. Then secondly, kindly, Mr. Chair, I was requesting, probably I've got a different approach regarding the number of safe shelters. My first question is, yes, the term has been given a social construct, safe shelters. Will these shelters be safe? And the question is, for the victims of gender-based violence, will they find another home in these safe shelters, or their rights will be jeopardized within these safe shelters? And do we have trainees who can work in these safe shelters? And then, again, when having so many safe shelters within the country, my question is, if you look at Manufacturing Concept, a book done by Noam Chomsky, one of the most quoted living scholars, he argues that when we talk so much of something in a society that thing really doesn't look all that big, then to some extent we legitimizes it. Yeah, so to some extent, there was the idea of the first presenter, whereby we have a small number of safe shelters, because again, nobody will be coming there to stay there permanently. That is my humble way of objection, but I stand to be corrected as well as to move forward. Thank you so much.
Very good. I think the point over is raising three fundamental things. One is the whole issue of the budget again. I think it's critical, and that's exactly why I was saying that we might want to bring Eva. And I'm trying to do that deliberately because when we're talking about most of these things of health, like mental health and all that, in relation to resources. Last year, I think the Ministry of Health had a total of around 80 billion Kenya shillings. 80 billion. And right now, 400 billion or thereabouts is going to counties. And counties claim that 35% in average of the money that go to them goes to health. So what am I saying? You get 35% of 400,000 or 400 billion, you realize around 140 billion versus what remains the Ministry of Health. So 140 billion is outside there with the county government. So when you're talking about the issue of the budget, that's exactly what I was trying to bring in one. Can we then be discussing some of those little details so that we get to know where there is resources and where we are supposed to be placing our activities? Carry on with Paul Alexander.
Well, thank you very much. I think I enjoy myself with these comments because we are here to present an idea for adoption by the Caucus members because we feel that there is a problem that requires our attention. We feel that there is an issue that requires our attention. And as I said in my presentation, what we are looking at is not having journalists for human rights working in isolation. We are looking at having journalists for human rights working with everyone who is in this room that is interested in working with us towards finding a lasting solution to the problem of gender-based violence and the lack of safe shelters for persons who fall victim of these offenses. That is one. So in terms of us discussing issues of models and sustainability, and the issue of working with communities, those are things that will come along the way. We have got very many different models. In our in-house thinking, we've come across different models. We are looking at having safe spaces that are integrated within existing service provision points that we currently have. And a good example is what Madam Casares was launching yesterday. She launched containers within police stations. Those are based in service delivery point. But is that a good and lasting solution to the challenge of safety for a victim of gender-based violence, for instance? It isn't, but it is a step. And that's why we also look at the community-based models. We are looking at emergency response centers, some which are just there or existing to solve a problem or address the challenge at that time, in the short term. Also, we are looking at safe shelters that would, for instance, address the issue in a much more long-term and more sustained way. And yes, when it gets to that level, we will also be discussing issues of staffing, who will be managing these shelters and how, and issues of security as well. How do we ensure that the persons who are in these shelters do not get secondary and tertiary violations or continue being violated in the name of their, staying somewhere that is safe. So all those issues will come at a time when we now get to sit together in a collaborative effort to find a lasting solution. We will consult with everybody. It's going to be a consultative forum. And yes, to answer the question that was asked about whether we are going to be the safe shelters will also address other persons. Yes, the gender binaries and all that. Yes, we are hoping or looking forward to having shelters that are both inclusive and holistic, not just in service provision, but also in terms of who is admitted and the kind of services they receive from these shelters. We are looking at human beings being able to receive, so long as you're a victim of gender-based violence, we do not want to care about what your gender is. We care about the fact that you've been violated and that you require services from these centers, and that's what we are looking forward to, having. So in terms of the data, Elizabeth, you will agree with me that having 426 people reporting violence over a period of 3 years sounds very off, even for you. So that again is evidence that we have a problem in terms of how data, first of all, is collected and managed, how and where it is stored, and how accessible that data is. So that's again one of the challenges that the safe houses, being coordinated in the way we envision, will try and solve. I called it fragmented data because it is existing in different, it's paltry. The data that I presented was sourced from the Kenya Integrated Health Management System. There are other systems that have been collecting data and fragmenting it, or rather collecting it for access by the public. So if I go to all the existing data points and put together data on gender-based violence, I think maybe we'd have data to the tune of hundreds of thousands, and we will all be shocked. But that comes to, cement my point that we have got so many persons who have been violated sexually or in regard to their gender. Some have gone out and reported, some haven't. We don't have the actual data
but we have some semblance of data, and that semblance of data is what is causing us to be alarmed and want to do something about it. I hope I've answered all the questions. If I've left any, I'll answer in the next round of questions.
Very good. I think we are not taking the next round of questions, but some of this is that I was standing like how is a safe center safe? You know, that was a very critical question. And it may not basically be your question. It could be a point of discussion in terms of what we are calling safe houses. How safe are they? Before we discuss in terms of where should they be or where must they be. So I think, and that's exactly why this idea, because where he was also coming in from, makes a lot of sense, and that's exactly very close to what we are saying. We should not have them everywhere, because we may be calling in for something that we may not need to happen. But those are discussion points that I think we want to look at. There are two presentations to be done. This is by Anjiku Maina. Anjiku is a lady's name, isn't it? But some men pick that name. Then I was waiting for Anjiku, the way I know Anjiku. Only to realize that our Anjiku Maina is the one who was supposed to do this presentation. This is a staff of Parliament, our staff of Parliament. And when he was here, initially I thought he was here because of our Caucus. He backstops us at Parliament as a parliamentary staff. So Anjiku is to give us some little presentation on the issue of suicide discriminalization. This is a big thing at the moment, and it's very closely related to what, for example, our speaker was raising, the issue of perpetrators in the whole this game of GBV. Everybody. Then Benedict, you're here, and Jennifer. I think they are going to be presenting something to do with child-friendly budgeting, and as they do that, child-friendly budgeting, we want to really consolidate all those issues to do with the budget around discussions after that presentation. And maybe now we'll have to look for Eva wherever she is, so that we give ourselves some assignments, so that immediately we are done with the issues of child budgeting. We clearly open the discussion in terms of how do we make inroads in the budget process, whether you are a child, whether you are a mentor, whether whatever you are, how do we do it? And how do we do it at the levels of the county? How do we do it at the levels of the national level? If we miss it, what happens? Yeah, those kind of discussions, I think, is what we want to do. Let's try to be very attentive to Wajiku. When you're ready, you let me know. We want to be very attentive to him because he may not sit in here for long after his presentation. So when we are attentive, that means that we may want to react or respond to his presentation immediately before we go to child budgeting. So please, let's try to be awake. IT. Okay. So my name is ready and is set. And Eva, we've talked so much about you and your absence. So I'll brief you. I'll brief you as our ticket goes on.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chanda, Chair SDG Caucus, members present, all of the other participants. As you heard, my name is Maina. I'm a procedural officer for the Parliament of Kenya National Assembly. And if the Speaker was here, he would tell you that we are the ones who, when Honorable Chanda decides to raise a point of order, we tell the Speaker whether that point of order is actually a point of order or he's deciding to delay or even create some disorganization in the house. But generally, that's what we do on a daily basis. The other thing that we do, and maybe that's why I'm here, is that as you're aware, Parliament sometimes, or most times, is involved in issues of diplomacy, issues of outside or international engagement, and the directorate for which I work in is involved in, is a link directorate between ourselves as Parliament and any other institution outside there, so that if we are talking of Agenda 2030 and where now the SDG Caucus comes in, then it is us who give support to the Caucus. So here today I'll be very brief, because the brief that I've been given is that we look at ways in which we can we can sort out issues of suicide, attempted suicide, and issues of decriminalization. And ladies and gentlemen, maybe there are those of you who are aware, maybe there are those who are not, but you know that 800,000 people commit suicide every year. 800,000. That's on record, and that tells you that this is a problem globally. So that so that it becomes an issue for everyone. It's a problem that we need to look at. And of course, different people are trying to do different things. You realize that at some point, our Director for Mental Health, Dr. Simon Njuguna, in their policy brief, they're saying that with the universal health cover or care coverage, they're trying to see how that can be linked so that it can help improve mental health. But as has been said, the budgeting issues become very important, so that when you're putting it under NCP, you realize that sometimes that becomes overlooked, so that other issues are set as a more precedent. That is what I'm proposing us to look at. Just an introduction of what we are doing, what we are looking at. Then we also try to look at what is it that is pertaining or is obtaining elsewhere. And finally, we would also want to look at the provisions and the roadmap, because I know the roadmap will be most important. So that we are saying attempted suicide and suicide issues are really not criminal things, but really mental illnesses related. So that when you look at our laws and we look at the legal provisions, you realize that our law treats suicide as a crime. Whereas all of us here, I know, majority, maybe perhaps 100% agree it is a mental illness issue, which, as Honorable Ochanda will agree, then requires a relook at our legal provisions. So looking outside, you realize that that's what we were talking about, and prevention of this is the business of everyone, and perhaps that's why you'll find the different participants from all over. It's the business of Parliament, it's the business of the government, it's the business of civil society, it's the business of everyone. So in India, at some point, the penal code provided for punishing, just like our penal code. Section 226 criminalizes attempted suicide. Because really, suicide, once successful, that person cannot be punished. Because really, they are gone, so that is it. So what the penal code then penalizes is your attempt to commit suicide. And that provision, the one that we have in our penal code, looks similar to something that used to be in the Indian penal code. And some development happened happened in India in 2017. They passed their own Mental Health Care Bill Act, which maybe perhaps before we can continue, look at this guy. This is a guy in Nairobi here, trying to commit suicide. If you look at the explanation there, is that this guy escaped the wrath of the people. Why? Because he was attempting to commit suicide. They were able to get him. And you know what they did to him. And that is how our laws respond to people who try to commit suicide. That you should be punished, so that if I say I'm going to kill myself, and I try to jump over some building or something, and I survive, the first thing the people will do is start beating me up. Kwa nini unataka kujiua? So, and that basically for me is the problem that we have, how we look at suicide issues and attempts to suicide, and then how we are going to make it a health issue, so that is we look at it not as a crime really, but an underlying problem that needs to be sorted. So those are the provisions we are talking about. But I was in India, and I would say that in 2017 they did their own Mental Health Care Act in 2017, and it limited that provision that was criminalizing attempts to suicide. And the wording, if I can read, was saying that any person who attempts to commit suicide shall be presumed, unless proven otherwise, to have severe stress and shall not be tried and punished under the code, the Indian Penal Code. So that act was actually trying to protect and recognizing, that was in 2017, and recognizing that this is a problem, and mentally, not unless it is proven otherwise that indeed the reason for which you are attempting to commit suicide are otherwise, then the law is supposed to treat you as a sick person who needs then the attention of the people. And they went ahead and they said that state government and every other government then would provide what we will say and what I'll be proposing later, the psychosocial support, so that you do not just decriminalize. So that you say, because right now, if you try to commit suicide, they'll take you to court, they'll take you to jail. It's a misdemeanor, and for which you can be jailed up to 2 years, or even a fine. But then what? But then again, you look at it, what we are proposing is that then decriminalize it. But fine, you've attempted to commit suicide. It is no longer an illegal thing. It's not a crime. Then what? So that the Indian scenario was very good, because then it called upon the government to provide the adequate care and rehabilitation, and also for such individuals to prevent any recurrence. And what was the implication at the end of it? Reduced stigma, people are able to talk about it, we are able to discuss it, because then there are mechanisms and avenues for which people are able to discuss issues of mental, or issues of attempted suicide, for which we have agreed is a mental problem. In the UK, again, it was and has been until as late as 1961, it was a crime. However, it was agreed, and because why it was seen to be immoral, it was seen to be unreligious for you to try to kill yourself, because religion says, and I know maybe all religion do not want you to take away your life, because it said life belongs to the Almighty, whichever religion that may be. So that even in the UK at that point, it was seen to be not religious, it is immoral. It was actually an affront to the crown. And that's why the crown and the kingdom itself would take action against you. Perhaps maybe because the government operates through taxation, and when you're dead, you cannot be taxed. So maybe that's why the crown was not happy with every taxpayer going and before their time. But really, that is it. But and again, further is that during that time, before the repeal of the English law, the common law so that for persons who committed suicide, who are actually successful, there were instances where the law would allow the crown to possess, to take over your possession. So that becomes like a punishment to you. You're dead, you're already gone. We are saying we cannot reach out to you. So how then do we punish you? We take everything that belongs to you. Even your people will not take it. The estate that you leave behind becomes the estate of the state or the kingdom. So that you realize at that point everyone was looking, and that is sadly the situation we are still in, where we are seeing suicide and issues of suicide as a crime rather than mental health. In the US, you find that right now, as of now, no state has criminalized the suicide and attempts to suicide. However, there are some sanctions that have been put. For example, issues of insurance, for example, which we also do, so that if you commit suicide, there are some claims that your family cannot seek. They cannot seek some benefits upon your death because you committed suicide, so that whereas that might be seen as prohibited because maybe you don't know why that person was committing suicide, it was a mental illness, but for the American situation right now is that those are the only things, but otherwise it is treated as an illness and given its due consideration, so that because remember when we're discussing issues of suicide, attempts to suicide, these are some of the rights issues that come. The right to die, it's a debate that happens. Is the physician-assisted suicide? I'm sick, my doctor says I cannot heal, I have agreed I need to go. Those are some of the emerging issues that are coming with the human rights and the right to make my own decision as a person. If I'm terminally ill and all that, but then the question that begs is, who is to make this decision? Who is to make this decision that, yes, you're terminally ill, you can never heal, this is your time and not tomorrow, you need to die today and not yesterday, but today and now. Who makes that decision? Those are some of the emerging issues. So I'll go back to our penal provisions. Whereas the brief that had been given was how we can work as the SDG Caucus, together with other partners, to see how we can deal with the current crime, because the current crime we are dealing with is at section 226, the issues of attempting to commit suicide. However, looking at it, you realize that the penal code provides, section 209, provides for a pact, something they call the suicide pact. And in fact, the suicide pact provides for a defense for someone who goes into a suicide pact. And I will read, if you allow me. I have not put it there. It says that it shall be manslaughter and shall not be murder for a person acting in pursuance of a suicide pact between him and another to kill the other or be a party to that killing himself or being killed by a third party. Now the problem comes even further, where it is shown that a person charged with the murder of another killed the other and was party to his killing or to his killing himself. Himself, in killing himself, it shall be the defense to prove that the person charged was acting in pursuance of a suicide pact between him and the other, so that the existence of a suicide pact becomes a defense for someone who has been found to have participated in the suicide of another, so that between me and yourself, we agree we are going to kill each other and we are going to kill, to die, to commit suicide together. But in one way or the other, maybe you will succeed and I don't, then I cannot be charged. Why? Because I will say it was a suicide pact between myself and that other person. It's sad maybe, I don't know whether you'll be sad that the other person died and did not die. Perhaps you will not be happy. But really, those are some of the issues that we will be proposing that we look at. Issues of aiding of suicide. We are saying that the law provides, because it says any person who procures another to kill himself or counsels another to kill himself or aids another in killing himself is guilty of a felony. The only thing we will be proposing, or we are proposing, is that this provision does not take care of the bullying, for example, cyberbullying, physical bullying, so that someone is bullied online to the point where their mental state does not become stable and they kill themselves. Is there a law that provides for that? There's none, because the penal code is silent on that, because by the time it was being made, really it did not foresee, or it is not clear that the physical or online bullying is one of the, can be one of the ways in which a person can be charged for aiding. And then, of course, the attempting suicide, then that becomes the gist of the reason why the SDG Caucus and, of course, the members would have wanted us to look at it even further, so that if possibly, can be deleted, because it says any person who attempts to kill himself is guilty of a misdemeanor. That is what the provision says, and that again takes us back to where we were beginning. The law treats this thing as a crime and not as someone who needs help. Because we are saying that there are no justifications to criminalize any attempted suicide. Really, everyone would agree there is no justification at all. And then additionally, we are saying criminalizing attempted suicide has to go hand in hand with provision of adequate facilities, adequate mechanisms for helping these people to get out of that which was taking them towards attempts to suicide. So that just deleting that provision and decriminalizing from where we sit, that might not be justifiable enough. Because the members here would agree with me, and this is worldwide, it has been felt elsewhere. You know, the government, and here the government, I'm being specific, the executive, as the owners, I would say, or the custodians of law and order. So that their issue has always been, you have decriminalized. You don't want us to get, so what do you want us to do? And there's that other flip side. Is a suicide bomber, how would you treat a suicide bomber? And can, once you've decriminalized attempt to suicide, and someone wears a vest loaded with bombs, and they come to a hotel like this, but you get them before they do, can the fact that they say, I was attempting to commit suicide, be a defense for them?
No.
Why?
No.
Why? Because they'll say, I am attempting to, yes, Honorable Speaker.
My brother, you know, this is a person who, that's not no longer just... when you intend to take others' lives, or put property that is not yours, or the public at risk in this kind of situation, then it's different. Because suicide is personal. Suicide should be treated just as the person themselves. But where there's an attempt on property to destroy others and lives, then it has to be looked at differently. It has to be attempted murder, actually.
And suppose, Speaker, with all due respect, I commit or I state that I wanted to kill myself. I'm in my car. I want to kill myself by way of a bomb. My intention is to kill myself. I am not interested with what is out there. I'm interested in myself.
And you have a huge bomb that is going to take down a whole building.
I don't know whether it's going to take the whole building. Maybe if it does, too bad.
No, I think the way we look at it
Yes.
is, you see, suicide, if the circumstance, we must look at the circumstance.
Yeah.
And what we are looking at is the mind,
Yeah.
the guilty mind.
Yeah.
And if this mind has conjured up a contraption that would endanger others in this attempt, then that is the mind that we want to punish. We want to hurt others. But if this mind, which is a sick mind, only wanted to snuff itself out, it's different. So it is a question of the mind. If you are going to have to put a bomb on yourself that is going to take others out, then we have to deal with you as an attempted murder.
A terrorist indeed, as the Honorable Chanda would say. But anyway, maybe those are some of the issues, emerging issues that will come if in the absence of this, and also looking ahead and what the other arm would want to argue, so that our suggestion would be to go further, not just like deleting that provision, but providing an explanation, a provision that would actually help everyone, so that there's clarity of what we are dealing with. Of course, everyone here would recall the fate of our mental health amendment bill. It is still hanging somewhere, and we are saying the existing Mental Health Act contains some provisions, because even the Act itself, the Mental Health Act is still geared towards not the current situation and maybe that's why Senator Kasanga was doing whatever it is she was doing to try and bring it up to speed. Sadly, that it has not it has not progressed further, but generally that's what we will be proposing. Now, going ahead, the proposed amendment that we are doing is that, of course, as I said, we delete that section that calls or recognizes suicide pacts. We also try to look at 225 on issues of encouraging, so that we can include the other emerging issues of cyberbullying and such kind of things, and also trying to delete 226 on the whole of it, because really attempt to suicide, we have agreed, it's not. The Mental Health Act, this is supposing that other one amendment bill does not happen, but really with that deletion, I know what the executive would want to see is that what then becomes the effect on the other side, so that this act might be amended to create for those mechanisms, so that that person is treated as a sick person in law, so that we don't just leave it in limbo, but we create mechanisms that would actually go ahead to reduce the issues of course, this is the other side we were discussing, issues of protest. Supposing a person does not hunger strike, for example. That's what I'm looking at, say a hunger strike. I do not eat and I die, because that person wants to kill themselves. So it is a protest a mental issue. Because if you don't eat, you will die. According to the law, they'll treat you as you are attempting to kill yourself. So then that becomes an area for debate. Of course, they failed the suicide bombers. Again, is that a terrorist? What kind of person is that? Is that a mental issue? Is that a terrorist issue? The law needs to provide, and everyone needs to be agreed on what it is that we are doing. And as I was concluding, it is not the final thing. Just decriminalizing is not final. Comprehensive health programs within the law would really help. So for us, the roadmap going forward, and of course the SDG Caucus, I'm aware, is agreeable. Some of the issues is that we need, of course, the drafting of the law, because that's the business for which we engage with at Parliament, so that the necessary amendments are drafted with the justifiable memorandum of objects. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to achieve? And how will the law then be applicable? Of course, identification of a promoter. Is it Honorable Chanda? Is it who? Because the law, again, the best and easiest way to bring a change of law is through the members of parliament. So that then this is processing through the LPS and also the legal services. Pre-publication scrutiny, that's when then everyone else is involved. You hear everyone because I can tell you it will not be as easy as can be seen. There'll be other interests and there'll be other people trying to do their things the other way. So that this is the area where mobilization, public participation can happen. So that the strategy for public participation becomes it becomes defined. Everyone knows what it is that is being sought. And of course, the others, which I know the members are well up to speed with, is the other stages of the bill as per practice. I don't know whether you've heard of the Kelvin Wanyambura. Of course, Dr. Chanda will say that name is for a woman, but it's a man. This guy tried to kill himself at some point, Kelvin, 2019, but he has become now an advocate of sorts, trying to issues of suicide and prevention of suicide. Because really, we are saying this is a business of everyone, as I started saying. It's a business of everyone. And Dr. Chanda, I think that is it for me. Thank you very much.
Now, no, why not Dr. President White? He has other statements. But I think what he has brought out has many things that have been many. Can we quickly isolate those of you who have some concerns or comment or perspective just on this, very quickly. Quickly on this alone before my leaves, the issue of this criminalizing suicide. How many somebody have a question, a comment, or has answers? We start from the last. How many of us have answers? Okay. So those are three. Will three be good to go? So start with Emma.
I'll be quicker. Maida, we may want to know how many suicides have happened in Kenya. Sorry to ask it that way. We need data to back up and probably start off the process. Then do we have any other new knowledge to show how maybe suicide has evolved? There is the element of culture that we need to also bring into it. In my community, if you die by suicide, those who come to see you beat you up. And it's because, and the reason why they do that is because not spirits, it is a deterrent. Some of these cultures around suicide, it's to make nobody else to take that route. In another community that borders our community, you are married at night. It is as a deterrent again. The speaker comes from my community, so he understands what I'm saying. The other bit is then how do we also start a process, a bottom-up process. Right now when we discuss about working on the build is a top-down. How do we then begin a bottom-up process so that then the mwananchi is at par with what is happening? So that then when we arrest people who have committed suicide, they are able to say, no, the law has discriminalized that, or the law has repealed this component of it. Then the other bit is that how also addressing issues of capacity around mental health and suicide. Not everybody is a specialist. How do we increase the numbers of specialists who work on issues of mental health? How do we strengthen boards? How do we strengthen capacities even at local levels
for those people who are the first point of contact. Then the last key issue I want to mention that needs to get into the middle of policy, for instance, is how then do we handle families that have had members who have committed suicide? The stigma that, you know, accompanies. We don't want to be biased. Kule kwenye nani walikunywa sumu ama wale waliua mtoto wao. How are we going to respond to the needs of those families, psychologically, socially, and probably economically? Thank you.
Very good. A new hand. A new hand. How many of those are new hands? Because I remember the first three, yes? Her and her. Okay. Carry on. No, she's the one. Yes.
So just to appreciate that presentation, very, very informative, and to ask two questions. One is around the delay in the amendment of the Mental Health Act, and just to ask whether you know, the stakeholders that are present can do anything to support that process, or what is causing, you know, this delay, because we've had so many bills that keep lapsing through the various houses of parliament that we've had so far. And the second question is to just seek to understand a bit more what led to your more comprehensive approach of the various, in this amendment of the suicide issue. Why did you decide not to go for just the one thing, decriminalization of suicide, which is more agreed on, and decided to open it up to the more sort of contentious issues around the various other sub-clauses that you're seeking to amend? Thank you.
You want to have our eyes closed to many other things. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Winras. Mine is more a comment with regard to the example that was floated in the room with regard to terrorism. If you find someone who's about to commit a suicide bomber, potential suicide bomber, I think from where I sit, when you're looking at the necessary amendments to the penal code, it's also important to look at other legislations that touch on issues that may be connected to offenses under the penal code. And in this particular case, for instance, there is the Prevention of Terrorism Act of 2012, Act which creates offenses related to terrorism. So I think the example that was given in the room will be better looked at from the Prevention of Terrorism Act rather than the penal code perspective. So a wholesome look at legislation before we amend, and then we end up with conflicting provisions in one when there's a sort of a parent act dealing with a particular issue. Thank you.
Does that question answer you? Yeah, so that question answers quite a bit of your concern. Now, the next bit is based on friendship, because you are close. The next hands are on friendship, and you must confirm whether you're my friend or not. Yeah, okay, I can see one from behind, yes. Very quickly.
Mr. Wanjiko, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think for me, it's more prevention programs. As you finalize that bill or the act, make sure that you put in some prevention programs. This will include the school, this will include the family and the community at large. It will also put in the awareness and everything to do with stigma and discrimination. Thank you.
Very good. Next friend. Next friend is here. She's here, there. Oh, you are also one of them. Okay, carry on.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wanjiko. That was a really wonderful presentation. Mine is a comment as well. First on data, there's a lot of underreporting. And this is specifically due to the stigma that we have on mental health, and also the fact that it's a criminal offense. So you'll find even if somebody died by suicide, they would ask for a report to be written otherwise. So that also really complicates collecting data. On the issue of what is being done, they are organizations that are offering psychological first aid and basic mental health training to the communities. to people in the community, in the churches, schools, and also the police as well. Yeah, we also at Chiroma we are doing that. And also something else that Mr. Anjiku should add there is on media reporting in regards to sensitivity, because that also goes ahead to increase stigma and as well as provide other ideas to somebody who could be seated at home, wondering what to do next. On the use of words, we highly encourage that we use specifically death by suicide rather than using committing suicide, because that puts the crime in the incident itself. The same way we record deaths by diabetes or hypertension or any other thing. And lastly, on my point is to have a multi-sectoral approach where we are concerned with all matters to do with rights, mental health issues, and specifically to suicide. It's not one man's business, as has been said in this meeting. The schools, right from the education system, the churches, within the family system, health system, and all of us seated hearing have a responsibility to ensure that we are all speaking the same language and supporting each other and holding space for each other. Thank you.
Very good. I know you got that. The issue of language. You know, there are deaths, died of cancer, but why not died of suicide? This one has committed because of gender.
Thank you. I'm Brian Odero from Akinawili. My point of concern would be on accused penal codes, and one of them is 226. So before we begin on discussion on how to delete the penal codes, we should look at what about the suspects. We are working with students, and at the time, you remember, for example, the case of Waruge in Kiambu. If Waruge attempts for suicide today, how will you view him? So earlier on, we had discussions about perpetrators who are supervising students, children. So if you delete this penal code without looking how you're going to handle this category of people, then you're likely to bring in an anarchy where you have an offense and you threaten to commit suicide. That is likely to happen, so kindly consider that.
Finally, Honorable Esther.
Marina, thank you. That was really a good presentation. You know, I noticed you spent a lot of time on trying to make us really understand the definitions. How do we deal with somebody who is killing himself vis-a-vis taking down other people, you know? But I think then we cannot look at decriminalizing suicide without looking at the anti-terrorism bill as well, because you have two aspects. You have a person who wants to kill himself, that's suicide, but then you have a person who wants to take down a community for whatever reason, that's a terrorist. So I think we really need to be clear. For me, somebody committing suicide and somebody committing a crime of trying to kill, even though right now it's a crime to commit suicide, but if you're trying to kill a community for whatever reason, that's a terrorist. So I think we cannot avoid looking at the two and seeing where we're going to go right or wrong. But there's also the issue of a mother. You know, with data, the data is important. The numbers are important. So what happens, how do we classify a woman who decides she wants to commit suicide, her life is so bad, and she doesn't do it on her own, she takes down her entire family of 5. So she kills herself, and she takes down her entire family of 5. In my head I'm thinking, how will the classification be? We have to be clear. Will the 5 be murder, and the mother be suicide? You know, in terms of data, we want data. And then also the mode of suicide. There are different ways to kill yourself. There's killing yourself by throwing yourself off a building. The other time we had a lady, she was mentally challenged We heard about a doctor actually who went and just walked right in front of a truck, a moving truck, and she was run over. It wasn't her first time to attempt to commit suicide, but that particular time she actually got run over by the truck, the trailer, and she died. So mode of suicide, I think that data is so important when we're capturing, so that we understand when do we need to have interventions, you know, because I feel that we have to understand how are people taking their lives. Is it medicine? Is it drugs? Then we have to look at the pharmaceutical laws. How do you not make these available? Because I have a young little lady who's always in Nairobi Hospital getting her stomach pumped. She's only 19. She's accessing these drugs. She's able to take prescription drugs, but she's getting so much more. And as long as we can access this, we cannot reduce suicides. So there's so many other areas. So there's a tie between the mode of suicide. If we want to take suicide because of drugs, overdose, then we know a strengthening of our pharmaceutical laws to not allow. I mean, when I went to Dubai, I cannot get a prescription of anything. But here in Kenya, you can get anything over the counters. So how do we make sure that we have a holistic and one sectorial approach? Thank you.
Okay. There's a lot around suicide. Yeah, so as you try to conclude, yes. Just because you.
No, she has actually just, what she said has brought to my mind. I'm just thinking, you know, we have peace in it. We drink a whole and we are always killing ourselves on this road. How do we consider that? Isn't that love?
Can we control the amount of happiness? Now, as we look at this, there are some stupid questions, but a little bit more logical. One is the whole issue of, are we talking about discriminalizing suicide or attempt to suicide? Because in terms of your common law of presentation, the king and everybody else, there was a punishment in terms of what's left behind when you have committed suicide. That's not in our case. So when we look at all these things, where do we place that? Then there's another one where you give us the example of India. The penal code still exists, but the Mental Health Act was created. Do they coexist?
The penal code was actually removed.
Oh, if it was removed, fine. Now my question was, because there is an element of presumption in the mental health, like for India, can that work in our case? Where, for example, the penal code still exists, but then an act comes, like that one of India, with that kind of a presumptive clause. Can that happen?
Thank you very much, Dr. Chanda. I'll try to respond. And perhaps the example I've given on the terrorist. This person, I was, you might recall, I didn't determine that person is a terrorist. It was just a person who wants to commit suicide. But the other person is has a vast load of ammunition or some explosive issues that are likely to clear out all of us. But that is not the intention they would say, or perhaps even in a flat somewhere. They are in their own house, they want to kill themselves, but maybe they are using, let me say, it's not that there is those that is not excessive, but they are using excessive ammunition against themselves, which is likely to affect others. But their reasoning would be, I am not interested in the others, I'm interested in myself. But again, I agree, there's need for not a singular look at statute, but really a holistic look at statute, so that there's agreement between every law that is coming through. On the issues of data, as has been said, it's scanty, it's different, it's all over. You'll find some sources saying it's about 300, 500 to 500 per year. You'll say, others will say 1,500 per year. But again, culture, and as has been said, who is reporting? How many people are actually willing to report that my brother or my mother committed suicide? Most of these things will not be said. So that, again, an official account of data, we say last year there were 200. Maybe there'll be 200 recorded, but the truth of the matter is it is worse down there. I agree, again, this was a comment which we agree with, is that there's need for capacity. And that's what we were saying with the law, that once this decides to happen, it will be important to create mechanisms that are able to support the system, so that we are not just deleting a provision of law, but we are deleting a provision of law and providing mechanism for which that affair or that matter will be dealt with. So, because when the penal code was being done ages ago, maybe some of these issues were not being discussed. There was no avenue for discussion. But now that we have that avenue, then it is important to provide those mechanisms, those avenues for support. And again, issues of stigma, I've mentioned a little bit, is that one of the things as the secretary or as part of the SDG Caucus, for me, is that once we start discussing the issue of the penal code and the punishments thereto attached to the attempted suicide, for me, the first gain would be that there's a discussion at some level. As much as Madam would want a down-top approach, even a discussion at this level is good enough, and it's a good starting point. There was the issue of delaying mental health amendment bill. I don't know whether Dr. Chanda will want to discuss that, but I know the status at which we are right now is the matter is still before the budget committee, because the bill was from the Senate. It was determined to have been a money bill. The Constitution, again, is very clear, 109, that the matters money bill will not come from the Senate. However, Article 114 allows for that provision, because the advisory of the committee can actually allow it. We have dealt with money bills that have come from the Senate, but upon advisory from the budget committee, because that's what the Constitution allows for. So the mental health bill, the last stage it was at was before the budget committee of the National Assembly. As to what then becomes of it, there are various avenues which I know have been mentioned, including even takeover by a member of the National Assembly, which in my recollection, my last engagement with Senator Kasanga, she was willing to do that if that is what would take for it to go ahead. It's not that she wants her name on it, but it is the passion to have these matters dealt with, so that if the National Assembly or the committee has an issue with it coming from the Senate, any other member can take it and go forward. And maybe just for your information, a committee which Honorable Speaker sits in has been proposing and is actually going to be looking ahead, because there's this issue of co-sponsorship of bills, so that members of the Senate and the member of the National Assembly can actually co-sponsor a bill, so that for those matters which have to come from the National Assembly, then they come in the name of that member of the National Assembly. Even if it's coming from the other side, but it's provided that these other matters that are money bill are coming in the name of that other member. It becomes, and it's an improvement of the process. And you know, the bicameral system is just with us, maybe this is the 7th year practicing it. So we are still creating processes and procedures which maybe perhaps will make life easier for everyone. Prevention programs, I agree, and as I said, those are things that would need consideration, so that we just don't do one thing and then we realize then it requires something else. Those are some of the things I was talking about, the psychosocial support, so that you decriminalize, but then again create what's next, and then the stigma. Let's have a discussion, so that if But by the way, you might note that up to 70%, I would say, of attempts to suicide might not be even known. They might happen behind a closed door. It doesn't happen, and that person wakes up in the morning and they realize, I put my chico there. I did not die, so here I am, I live another day, then I'll try another time. So that, but if there's a discussion, you destigmatize this debate, then it becomes easy. And that would be if there are mechanisms and approaches and people on the ground are actually discussing this matter. It is seen as a disease, so that I'll go to a doctor to say, I have suicidal thoughts perhaps. Then they'll say, you're sick because of this, and then we can take over and deal with it. But right now, you say, I have suicidal thoughts, someone will say, we are not Kujua, Chapa. The next thing, you're arrested, you're taken to the chief police station, you're done, you're there for 2 years. What happens? You will still, that has not dealt with the suicidal thoughts or anything. Again, I don't know if I've left anything. I don't know. Okay. But I'm thinking that is it. Thank you very. Sorry, Mheshimiwa Esther Pasaris. Yes, it will be very important for classification so that it is clear this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone who has intention of killing himself together with other people, but really this is what we're talking about, so that as we are getting the drafting instructions, we are clear this is the direction that every person in the sector wants us to take, so that it becomes a totality, a holistic view of the whole affair. Thank you very much.
Very well. I think this confirms that we still have a lot to do around that area. It's work in progress. It can't end now without run on with it. As we're discussing this, we're joined by Honorable Senator Janet Ongera, who is right in front of me here. We agreed we'll be doing that as and when. And she will at one time confirm to us whether there's a safe house in Kisi. Remember I mentioned something like that earlier when she was not here. That I heard. Yeah? Do you want to do that straight away?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry that I was late. I was traveling from Kisi because I'm very passionate about this caucus. Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy that we are discussing GBV issues because, as you know, Kisi County has the highest rate of GBV. And as I speak now, we have close to almost records that are recorded in the Kisi Teaching and Referral Hospital. Per month, we get 200 cases of GBV cases, and the majority of those are women and young girls. Men, maybe you get 1 or 2 where the wife has beaten. As Speaker, I'm sure you can understand. So because of these GBV cases, which are highly reported, we have had women whose hands have been chopped off. Last year we had 2 women whose hands were actually chopped off, and those were from the right hand chopped off by their husbands. We also had 2 ladies who were sexually assaulted in the maize plantations when they were digging, and then they were killed. They are serious incidents. Some have even raised questions. Because of this and this prevalence, through my Office of National Government Affirmative Action, we decided to build a GBV center, which we have now just completed. And although we completed that GBV center, we are being stopped from opening it because somebody has grabbed that land. I want people from the NGO world to help me as we are working out to actually have that person return that title. But this is on government land. The GBV center is now complete, and we should be opening it anytime now. And once we open this center, we are going to use it for counseling of the various victims. We'll also do drug and substance taking rehabilitation. And apart from counseling, we actually want it to be a sanctuary where women will stay, or young girls, and there is also a section where if the boy child is also affected. So we have 8 beds on one side and another 8 beds on the other side. That is the hostel part with a small kitchen. We have a counseling room and also a police officer who will be staying there permanently. And then there is a hall where we can do these activities. So, Mr. Chairman, I could stop there. But I really enjoy
Karibu sana, Mheshimiwa. There are a number of answers. How should the house look like? Did you get that? Yeah, there was already a kitchen, some 16 or so beds, one on the other side, but then that's it. But that's a confirmation that I wanted. There's something like that in Korea. If Danita was here, I would have allowed her to confirm that. So let's carry on. In terms of where we are leading Maina, Senator Kasanga has sent me what is called a closing remark. Yeah? And that closing remark is on the mental health issue. That the ministry apparently is now very concerned about it, and they are calling a meeting between us and them sometimes anytime after next week. And that will mean that a lot of our other partners who are dealing in this area we need to talk more. And as we talk more, some of the things that we must work, we really insist that should not leave, should not be left out, is the whole issue of attempted suicide and the mental health situation. So those are the closing remarks. Now, as we close, we want to go for the final presentation. Yeah? So Benedict and Jennifer, are you around? We agreed that in this final presentation, there are issues to do with the budget, and this is specific to child budgeting. We were talking about mental health at one stage. How do we budget for mental health? I already given it in terms of the stages, within what timelines are you to strike in. Those are things that were just mentioned. So now I want to consolidate all of them around. Oh, okay. Yeah? All right. You brought us behind. Can we give you a closing remark?
Sorry for bringing you behind. My name is Sami Moraya from Journalists for Human Rights. There's somebody there who mentioned sensitivity of coverage of mental issues and the language that we should use as the media. And I just wanted to say the biggest problem we have as the media, and especially when we are dealing with civil society, is there's always an assumption that the media knows everything, which is a very big problem. And part of what we need to do, and also urge Mr. Anjibo, is we do more training on reporting of these specialized issues. And until we do that, we will always see the mistakes that we keep on complaining about, and we will always hear that language that we feel is inappropriate, but we basically have to talk to the media about coverage of the different issues. That's all I wanted to say, Mr.
I think it's very important in terms of like going forward. How do we want to engage with the media? I think this needs to be. There was a time. The people are fighting. Now there was a time where we were looking at some of these things, and the media. What we are realizing at one time is that no, there are these reporters, there are the correspondents, and all of them. But then there's a cut of the media here, from the subs to the editors. And as that is the arrangement, there's a lot more raw stuff that goes out minus the subs or editors see. So I think this is where there's a very big problem. Because there is the hierarchy in terms of how things work out in the media houses and all this kind of things. There are those who get the raw stuff. There are those who, in one way or the other, needs to be moderators if it requires moderation. But that's where it's lost. So I think in terms of how we are to engage with the media, this really needs to be a matter that you really need to pick up as your organization. say that we don't blame you in the end. Yeah, we don't blame you. Now, I want to welcome Benedict for purposes of child budgeting. Are you able to be brief? All right.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mheshimiwa Ochanda. My name is Benedict Omilo from the East Africa Child Rights Network. I also want Mheshimiwa to allow me to recognize, as you have been recognizing our members of parliament, recognize our seniors who came a bit after we started. We have with us here Plan International, Madame Elsie Masaba.
Elsie, for you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Elsie Masaba. I work for the regional office of Plan International. We're glad to be working closely with the East Africa Child Rights and also Mtoto News. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Elsie. I want also to recognize our CEO, Dr. Judith Olo, who is the CEO at Each Rights, that is the East African Center for Human Rights.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, everyone, for these declarations. I think in the end, it adds value to lives of children in Kenya.
Thank you, Daktari. And our brother Muteru, who is also in this field and has engaged a lot when it comes to the children's bill amendments.
Thank you very much, Benedict. Thank you all for having me. Jennifer, my colleague in many of our ventures and in some of our committees. Thank you.
Thank you, and nashukuru sana Daktari for that. I want to appreciate also our members of parliament from the Sdgs Caucus and other caucuses in parliament, including Keopa, for having worked with the CSOs very closely. And actually we can see from what you are also doing on the ground, like your utilization of the Affirmative Action Fund. It is very, very impressive for the priorities you have in mind. Thank you very much. And as the technicians work on our projections, we just want to be very brief on budgeting for children. We have called our presentation Budgeting for Children and Investment for the Future, and we'll be presenting with my colleague Jennifer here. So, what is it about budgeting for children? Today we are here talking about human rights-based approach. And children's rights are human rights, as you know very well. And investing in children is about rights, is about good economics, about good governance, and about the future of our society and our place in the world. There are some trends when it comes to children budgeting in Kenya, or there are some things that we may not be aware that happen. So children account for about 52% of Kenya's population, yet the entire, and we are saying entire, budget under the 9 ministries on average is only 25%. But again, when you go down then to the counties, it might even be worse. So when you look at what has been happening, you find that even the children's function, some have been asking, is it a national function or a county government function? So for us to engage in this further or be successful in budgeting for children or attain our goals as CSOs and also as stakeholders, we need legal frameworks in place, and that's why we are looking at the children bill amendments, then political goodwill, and I appreciate Waheshimiwa again, and escalate this to other Waheshimiwas in Parliament and beyond. So, and lastly, we also need resources. So I'll allow me to usher in my colleague to continue with the next piece of presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. So my name is Jennifer. I speak a lot. So
So as Ben said, for us, investment is not just money. Investment is the kind of policies and legal framework that we have in place. Okay? Political goodwill. Dr. Chandler is not here. He's one of those guys you call and ask, oh, sorry, you moved spaces. Honorable Pasaris, and those guys at midnight, they call, hi Jennifer, watoto wanachapa hivi, unaweza kasaidia, you know? So those are the people, they're so invested, they have the political goodwill, they're invested. You can see they invested in the way they do their things because that is an investment. And then number 3 is where money comes in, okay? So how much money is allocated? So I'm going to start with the policy framework. And currently, in Parliament, we have 2 very important bills. The first one is the children's bill. We cannot invest in children when we don't have a legal framework, okay? And I know Dr. Chanda can tell you the number of times I've gone to speak to him and we ask him for money for children, and he says, where is it costed? And then you are telling him about online child protection. Is it anywhere in the legal framework that I can go and standing order number, whatever. Online child protection has not been costed. We don't have that. Why? Because our children's bill is as old as some people in this room. Okay, it's 21 years old. It has not been done. But we are very happy. We are doing some happy dances because the cabinet just passed it last week, and we are hoping it will be. And Dr. Gogo told me that JLAC is also looking at it. So we are hoping before elections starts in August 2021, we will have a Children's Act 2020, at least 20 years later. So as you can see, the bill, it gives effect to the provision of Article 27 of the Constitution because the children's bill is not aligned to the Constitution. And it gives obligations, okay, to states at national level and the county level. So, right now the issues we have with the counties, whenever you tell them a budget for children, because the budget for counties is 15%, and the 15% goes to ECT. That's the only thing they cost at the county level for children, ECT, and it's very, very little. So for us to be able to obligate them to do that, we needed to include them in the children's bill. And my friend Dr. Gogo has come. She's a champion for children's bill. So so the children's bill has a very clear obligations and for children at the county level, for how county is supposed to allocate money, how to treat children, and that's why we are calling upon for this bill to be passed. Another interesting bill, for us to be able to serve children, we need what I call the rubber, okay? We need the workforce, okay? And currently in Parliament you have the social workers bill, okay? And the social workers bill, once we have spoken about mental health. In the morning we had a small meeting there and we were talking about mental health. But how can we talk about mental health provision when we don't have trained, regulated, capacitated workforce? Currently, only the psychologists, I think, are regulated, but everybody who wakes up in the morning wakes up, oh, I feel the Holy Spirit, I want to work with children. Yes, and they become a children's worker and they start calling themselves social workers, okay? And they don't have any training, okay? They don't have any regulation. So when that child or that person is abused, who's backstop? Okay, who is going to follow up to ensure that doesn't happen again? We don't have that right now. We don't have regulation for social workers. We don't have standardized training. There's always a college here and there popping up everywhere, and they call themselves social work training colleges. But they're not providing the kind of training I went through. Okay, the kind of training the Honorable is not here. The only social worker I know in Parliament, he's not here. So they have not got the kind of training that we have gone through. So they come, when you listen to them and go like, that does not sound like, anything about social work. Research, we've spoken a lot about research, okay? How are we going to ensure that we have the current trends of social work being implemented in Kenya? Or are we using studies from 1964, okay? Are we using practices from 1964? We need to be able to have a social workers bill that is very evolving. And then now I'm going to money bill. Now I'm going back to money. So as I'm not going to belabor that particular slide. So you can see how much money is allocated to children. I'm sorry for people who are not children, I am here for the children. You can see it's very, very little. And you will see in the next slide, so you can see the biggest one is the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. And they get 44%, and majority of this goes to the OBC and elderly, okay? It doesn't go to children that money doesn't go to children, it goes to OBCs are children. The elders ones, I've forgotten the elderly people. You know, that money that goes there, it is calculated there. So so which is very little, and like we have spoken, actually I was speaking in the morning about adolescent and mental health. We have a lot of children who are incarcerated, they are in corrective institutions, okay? But they are not there because they are bad children. They are there because of mental health issues. But because we don't have the money to be able to do mental health assessment, those children are labeled as bad children, and they end up in juvenile institutions, okay? Or they end up in rehab is juvenile, okay? Because we don't have mental health, we don't have funding going to those institutions, okay? We don't have enough social workers, we don't have enough psychologists working in this institution. Why? Hakuna pesa. The money that is allocated there is not enough, okay? And you will see in this. So this one, I got this is a government document. You can go look for it. Just Google in Treasury 0908000, and this will come up with all of them. And you will see the amount of money for children has been reducing. Can you note that? Have you noted? It has been reducing. It has not been increasing. And remember, right now, according to 2019 census, we are 54% below the age of 18. And when the children start banning schools, they are told, what are they being told? They are going to get a case record. But did we actually do any? I have no idea what has happened. And when students start banning schools, did we actually think of doing psychosocial support when these kids were going back to school after 1 year off? Did we think that these children have trauma of COVID? They don't know, they have just lost a whole year of their life, and then we blame them because they are banning schools. I know I'm going to get in trouble with probably some areas, but that is a reality. We have not given children. Why? Look at the budget. We do not have people to hire. There's a law, there's a policy right now that we need to have a social worker in every school. We have to have a psychologist in every school. It's not a reality. We just upgrade a teacher and we say you are the Catholic teacher. That teacher was trained on how to teach. She was not trained or was not trained on how to do psychosocial support. Okay? Why? Look at the budget. Because the Department of Children's Services cannot afford to hire more social workers. Cannot afford to hire more school social workers. Okay? Our hospitals cannot afford to hire more medical social workers or psychologists. Okay? Okay? Because of the budget. As you can see, it's reducing. Okay? As you can see, it goes down every year. Every year, Dr. Chanda, all our advocacy money inaendaga tu chini chini. Okay? So the money is going down. It does not increase. This is, look, 2023. That is this next year after elections. You can see the amount of money. It's reducing. Okay? So, let me finish Motero, because you see Dr. Chanda is on my case. He wants me to keep me out of here. So here are the recommendations. Okay, county government should consolidate their gains made in attention to budgetary allocation for ECD in order to improve enrollment. Okay, increase government-owned resources to sustain, to reduce child mortality rate and improve education enrollment in arid areas. To maintain policy ambition in cushioning vulnerable children. I've just talked about policy, right? Okay. Two-level government should improve and make social sector spending more effective for better outcome for children. Okay? And development partners should partner with CSOs to enhance the capacity of community members and county assembly to engage more effectively in child budget advocacy and oversight. Okay? So in other words, we need more money. Okay? I think I've just given you guys, the ones who are here, content. Yeah, for the budget statement discussion. Before I finish up, I know Honorable Gogo had requested you to speak about the children's bill. That's her baby. So, Dr. Gogo, you can come before we start. I'm just sharing my time, Dr. Gogo.
Sorry about the interruption. I actually briefed you on the children's bill. You should have just done a presentation. But I'm here to tell this community of Kenyans and our friends that so far we've done a presentation at the budget committee. It was passed, the children's bill was passed. And it's now seated with JAILA, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. And I talked to Dr. Chanda, I talked to our speaker, and last week, and I told him it is taking far too long, that he should fast track it for us. And he agreed, but I didn't get time to see him this week. So I hope to see him next week. It is moving, and I hope it moves faster. The main thing, and we also have our speaker here, Honorable Speaker, sir, for as many are as of the opinion to fast track this bill, say aye. Aye. Yeah, Speaker, you have heard the ayes have it. So, Speaker, please kindly fast track this for us. You're a member of this caucus, and you have been very active. The main thing I wanted to highlight, I don't know if because I came and found you in the middle of the presentation, is the diversion program that is included in this children's bill. When children find themselves in conflict with the law, more often than not you find them institutionalized. But we want to anchor it in law that there could be alternative ways of probably taking care of these children so that they are not put under institutions. That is one major issue about this bill. And another thing that I had mentioned earlier is the paramountcy principle in the best interest of the child. That when something happens, whether in the judicial system, whether in parliamentary system, whether it's in budgeting the way you are insisting, that all of the parliamentary budgets should be focused mainly in the best interest of the child. In your home, all of you who are seated here, we have television sets, and I had this one from pediatrician. We have television sets, and we also have sofa sets. What other set do we have at home? Yeah, we have a television set. Doctor, what do you have at home? A television set, a sofa set, and another, what other sets? Mathematical set. No, that one is not at home, it's in school. But when was the last time you ever allowed that child to touch that television set? And do we ever have television sets that are meant for children? You have a big screen that is meant for everybody. You want to watch football, and then you also want to monitor what they are watching there. Do we have television systems that are specifically inclined to be watched by children, and you put it at home, and you remove Netflix that you don't want, and then you allow those children to watch those things at their own time without really supervising them? It's a challenge I got from a pediatrician. In the best interest of the child is what we are emphasizing, and actually the new law, the new bill, when it is passed into law, it is going to give a definition of what is in the best interest of the child. Those who have gone to a school of law and have gone to study law and have practiced law and are lawyers and are judges and are advocates and whatever, that category, you know very well this one depends on who is handling the child. The way you are saying, it depends on the mood of the person who is handling the child. But we want to now have it defined. What is in the best interest of the child? We saw the other day when there was a dispute between two parents, and a girl had stayed with the father for the longest time, and the mother went contesting in court to have custody of this girl. And the girl, I don't know how that case ended, but the girl really cried and wanted to stay with the father. Do you remember that particular case? Yeah. What was in the best interest of that child? What really we need to, and that is what you are pursuing. Of course, at some point we were all children. Don't pretend you are not one, and let us be advocates for children. Thank you very much.
Very good.
I actually have done, but I've given, if you didn't receive our small gift, you can have it, and I can see. So you have something, a giveaway. If you don't have one, just lift up your hand and get one.
Thank you, Jennifer, especially for your presentation. The last one. I just saw. I don't know whether you saw that small table, Dr. Chandra, the budget one. In the last 3 years, 3 years alone, 10 billion has disappeared from the children's budget. From 10 billion. Look here and look here. Are you seeing this? Yes.
Social Development and Children's Services.
And this is I don't know.
Okay.
I'm about to change myself to the gate of Parliament.
All right. So, Jennifer?
No, thank you. I am done. Just in case you have questions, Ben and myself and Teru are going to respond to your questions.
Okay. Now, but as this, people clap for Jennifer, isn't it? Yeah. And Benedict, clap for Benedict. No clap for Muteru. Okay. Now, let's raise a few concerns around this. I think this is interesting. It's important that something like this is looked at. And sometimes it's very easy to defend this kind of a thing. It's very easy. It's only that sometimes it goes undetected. Yeah? But immediately it goes undetected, it goes. But if we had the mechanisms, like what you're telling me now, for example, I look at it and I just pick it the way it is, which I'm going to pick anyway. Then you can act on it. One can act on it. But now, as we discuss this, there are concerns. I know Jennifer and the child budgeting are more focused largely on this, for example, the national arrangement. How do you want to look at issues, for example, mental health, and what I was talking about in terms of funds that go to the counties? But let me open it up for discussion. Who wants to take a first go? As we are still wondering whether you want to be the first. With Malidian, I think daily life is now seized of too many things. If we want to be a little bit smart, I think let's just get to Kigali on your own and confirm whether this deal is with them. And you see the state. Yes, and then the state. Say that we are able to run on with it. No, Parliament after June is not going to be any sober again. So we have to have this period for action. Okay, I wanted to pick hands that were for comments or on issues of budget. You have next year. Yeah? Yes, on the budget now.
On the budget, I don't know what you presented on the budget, but it must have been an issue of increasing the budgetary allocation. I want to presume. There is an element of increasing the budgetary allocation. But what do we do with the little that we have? How many of us come from Homa Bay County here? So that I'm not castigated. Yeah, you come from Homa Bay. Anybody else who come from Homa Bay? Yes, Homa Bay and are all here. And ECD is devolved. True or false? ECD is devolved. How many have been to those ECD systems in Homa Bay? Literally. And I respect my county, I love my county, I love my governor, I love the whole system working. But watoto wetu wanakuliwa na naitwa nini? And I can go and say this one before the national television station. We are talking about increasing the allocation. For those of us who are charged with the responsibility of using the little that is there, are we using it? Because we will always push Parliament for more. But it is the very Kenyan who gets the little that they are able to get, and they can't use it properly. So the bit of bringing it there, you have people of substance here who can push for increased allocation. People who are doing, various departments who are giving policy statements to various committees. That is the further it can go. And 2022-2023, it has kept on decreasing. Is it increasing or decreasing? social development and child services. 3.9, 3.8, 3.6, 4 point. So are you complaining about 4.3 and 3.9? 22, 23, and 19 and 20? Yeah. I am concerned about 4.3. So, and you know, children can never complain about their budget. It's relegated to adults. I want to challenge people who are sitting in this room. There are people who have enriched themselves. Somebody had raised this one earlier in the morning. And among the other issues that are addressed in the bill is the management of child welfare systems. That is another element that is brought there. They feed these children with mkati yenye imeoza, yenye imetoka kwa mahoteli, and then they also get donor funding. And are we responsible over these children's lives, over the donor funding that we get? Can we account for it one-on-one? Let us not also even castigate the Kenyan government. The ones who run children's homes, the ones who, and it is a contentious issue because people make millions from children. People make a lot of money from children. You just hide under the guise of running a child welfare system and you get funding and you enrich yourself. I've never seen somebody who is working with children die poor, unless you can quote one here. So we need to do soul searching ourselves. Where do we want to go? Dr. Chanda, where do we want to go as Kenyans? Where do we want to go as members of parliament? What are we doing? What are we doing with CDF? Because a child is up to the age of 18. And we find colleagues simply not even doing basic work in our schools. And we want more allocation. I know we are looking at social development and child services. But about our basic education in schools, MPs who are here. Unfortunately, I normally talk with a lot of passion and I normally talk like I'm quarreling. But that is the truth of the matter. Kenyans have a problem. Thank you, Dr.
It's good to remain a child. Now, I think I'll open this up for comments and questions. But see, the concerns of Lillian are very, very important. I think in one of the meetings we did, or we had, we asked how much amount of money is outside there, outside the government hands. And it was massive. It was a lot of money, and that's exactly what I think is trying to bring around. Now, who else? Can I see another hand? You're tired? People are tired? Who wants to comment on this? Nobody. Now, if there's nobody, let's take assignments. Let's go forward. Yeah, say that we close. Number one is I've taken it upon myself today to invite in this meeting a clerk, a principal clerk in the budget committee. By yesterday, they had confirmed I was going to be here, but things reversed. Summary committers, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. There were summary committers on the supplementary budget and of course on the BPS. So he was not able to manage to be here because they have to do that. They were sitting since last night. But we have kind of agreed with him, and that's exactly why I'm getting here. So that if we are able to isolate some of these things, we pick with him direct. That was number one. That's one thing that I've taken. Oh, I was forgetting if I'm going to let me then just clear this statement. That was one thing that I've taken up. Imelda is not here. But Imelda needed to confirm. I think there's a meeting that we are supposed to be doing with the budget committee. And maybe one of our partners is supporting it. I don't know who. Imelda needed to confirm on this. And if that is confirmed, I want to suggest a number of things. Let these things not surprise us. Can we put them all in one piece? In a more summarized manner, so that when we are meeting, we can take less than 15 minutes and we say the budget committee, this is it. How can we have these things rectified? Because something like this is very easy, really easy in my view, to have it corrected. If it's not corrected now, it can be corrected as we are doing the BPS. BPS, we are given up to the end of next week, I think. There was an extension of time. So what I'm trying to say is that between now, Mela, I was making a statement which I'm not too sure about.
Yes.
The meeting that was supposed to be doing with the budget committee. Iran was supposed to be here, as I told you.
Yes.
And there were a few things in the parliament that would have to be here. But we agreed that we are picking up with him after this.
We were waiting for a date for both of you.
So what I'm trying to say is that if this date is on, are we able, Jennifer, who else? Benedict, say that we are able to isolate something like this that is very clear-cut. Yeah? Because, you know, the budget committee can ask the department, why has this been happening and what has happened? Say that this money has not been budgeted for over 2 years. Because sometimes it's reduced from the department. Or it was reduced from cleaning. Now there was another process that was being done for social protection. Cleaning the data and biometric, I don't know what and what. And they ended up saying how much money they saved. I don't know whether you were able to remember that. This former DC, yeah, is a current PS, and I think now a CS. He mentioned the amount of money, some billions of shillings that they were able to save because of pilferage. So maybe that pilferage is this kind of thing that we are seeing here, but we need to confirm that with the budget committee. I wanted to get to the next assignment, but apparently Eva, we had given her some assignment to tell us one or two things about the county, how we can make inroads in the county budgets.
Daktari, asante. It looks like today is my day for speaking too much in a meeting. So just on the line of budgets, I mentioned earlier that I have been working with several counties at county level, and there are some things that we have learned in the process. I also support a certain department and treasury, and there are things that probably I need to bring into awareness in regards of budgeting. Now, if you presented that statistic at the department, at county level, the budget that you presented it, they will look at it and see that, and agree that you have presented something. But according to our lenses, it does not communicate anything. It just shows there was a decrease and there was an increase. So what? We need to do a better, deeper analysis to know where was the decrease and where was the increase. We need to use different lenses. In terms of budgeting for children, we have the health department, we have the education department, the gender department, and all of them receive resources. And somehow these resources need to go into children issues. So how much did they receive? How much was spent? What programs exist? How much do these programs consume? In other special circumstances, we have special programs like overseas. How much have they received? How much have they used? So that analysis needs to be a little bit deeper so that it communicates more. Then we can begin to see where do we put more along the lines of the needs of children. Then there is data. When you accompany this and you say children in Kenya, we have people below the age of 18 who are, we are 54%, 52%. So then, what does that mean? How many girls, how many boys at county level? How many numbers of children do we have in the 47 counties? So that then we have evidence-based allocation, budgeting, and response. Then the other bit is that we always budget and leave it at allocation. But Mheshimiwa, do we go further to look at disbursements? These are allocations that we are talking about. What about the disbursements? And in terms of disbursements, are we tracking? What indicators are we using? How are we reporting? Those are very, very key things that we need to engage in. And also the ability of us to look at capacities. ECD centers hired at county level, most of them hired people who had reached Form 4 level. They have no basic knowledge on child development. How much do you expect out of them? So what standards have we also put in place? We would have laws, policies, and budgets, but standards and capacities for people also mean something. they create a difference. And then I think as we move ahead with development, we may want to start having costed plans. The Ministry of Education does it very well. They indicate that this is the much we need for education at different levels. But when you come to health, when you come to gender, when you come to social services, it is just blind budgeting. Blind budgeting. We don't know how much it will cost us to rehabilitate street children. We don't have any costed plan to support this. Then the other bit is that we need to understand also the trends in budgeting. Besides just having the number, the amounts, we need to know who gets more, who gets less. What are the trends? Did they get low amounts of budget this year? What will happen next year? And at the end of the day, we also need to work to solve problems so that we are not always just talking about budgets and increase, and yet we don't see what all this is yielding. Finally, we need to build a business case. I will tell you this, at Treasury, there is a competition. The state, you have budget for State House, you have budget for the DP, you have budgets for the opposition leader, you have budgets for assemblies, there is a huge competition, and it is like winner takes it all. So how do you build your case and defend yourself? If the children's departments in different counties and national level do not have programs that are really very substantive, they can sit and defend them, then what will make the government allocate you resources as much as it is a right? So I still insist that we need to have capacity to come up with programs that really respond to the needs of children at different levels. Thank you.
All right. I think that's a very nice input so far. But still, in terms of how we are looking at the issues of budget, I think if I don't know whether you are going to help us in this, say that we are able to know exactly how counties budget. I have no idea about the county's budgeting process. Yes, so not now, and this is exactly what I was trying to request, so that we also get to know how are the processes in the counties in terms of budget making. I'm fairly aware of what we do, particularly at the National Assembly, because now in the counties they are thinking with CIDP, there is something that's called public participation, which is completely different from how we do public participation in our budget at the national level. Because I think what they do for public participation are committing money to projects that are listed by the public at the world level. And if you were to rely on that to do, for example, a mentor or to have a mentor help resource, it will never come from a ward. That one I can assure you. Wards are those who are going to look for water, they are going to look for whatever and whatever, and they may not see this less, there are things that are not so common to a particular ward. For them to be isolated is a big problem. So I think this is something that we really need to pick up, so that we see exactly how counties make their budgets and their periods. Because, for example, now when the National Assembly does splits the revenue, is when they get to know the amount of money that they have. Before that, they don't know. And at what time is that? That is sometimes with the revenue division being sometimes in April or something like that. So it is in April when they get to know what they call their resource envelope. Yet, in the national government, each department has an idea of what's called a resource envelope by October. Yeah, such that when the new BPS comes around, they know that their ceilings are like this. Yeah, your ceiling is 72 billion, the other one is this and that. That doesn't happen in the counties, but it happens here. So if you are able to get to know this, then civil society or organizations that are working in various fields are able to engage specific counties at those specific periods of time. That's where I was coming in from. So maybe I think we'll want to be taken to speed in terms of how counties budget. Then now, we are concluding, isn't it? These were closing remarks and way forward. Now, we had indicated that this meeting we may need to do. Jennifer and your team, please help us isolate these problems too quickly, so that when we get space to meet the budget committee, we have time to work on, to be on no notice, because the committee is really busy. Right now they're handling supplementary budget. At the same time they're handling what I was calling the DPS. And those things must end in the next 2 weeks. Supplementary, I think, may even end before then. So say that the issue of targeting in terms of time, we really tried this time around, if you have never attempted it any other time. Then there's a whole issue of itematizing the budget. Itematizing the budget will be so critical when you're working with the counties, for example. That one is not very easy to work with when you're dealing with the assembly. We never have that kind of a very seriously itematized budget. What we have are these coded budgets. You know the codes. Yeah? We have those coded budget. And that coded budget, sometimes you've seen one code has 3 billion shillings. And when it has 3 billion shillings, you may not know in terms of itematized arrangement where those 3 billion are supposed to go. So that's something that I think you may want to engage in at the level of the department, not at the level of the committee. I don't know whether somebody is listening. Jennifer.
I am listening.
Are you listening?
I am.
Yes. So purposes of the itematized stuff, you may not deal with that with the Parliament. You may deal with that with the departments before. So from October, I think it's important that you start looking at what is it in terms of, are they child, are they mentor, are they what, that you are looking at. If they are not there, that's the time that you can persuade that they are brought in. They have said that when the budget is finally coded and goes to Parliament, they have those little stuff in them. I really want to end at that point. But I want to promise 2 things, that immediately the lady and children's bill comes up, we'll want to rally behind it, and we've done that before. We'll also want to rally behind the mental health bill. There is a social, you call it social what bill? Social workers. I saw it somewhere. Social workers bill. Social workers bill, I think, somewhere with the health committee in Parliament. Is that so? Are you aware of something like that?
Conducting bills.
Yeah?
Yeah. Public participation.
Public participation, from the comment I had from the speaker yesterday, you need to be smart. But there is something on social workers bill. Yeah? I've seen it either in the list of the health committee items. There is, so
it is actually public participation.
what did you work on it? Social workers bill.
Yes.
Is it your bill?
Yes,
No.
it's one of your members. It's one of your members who is sponsoring it.
Yes, so I think it's important that we get to know some of these details. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense. When there's a bill, you work around it, you see it, you discuss. I say that when it comes to the House, all of you, or many of you, are aware of what it is in terms of content, and you are able to contribute and discuss on something like that very quickly. You know, you are more technical people if you are working with the members of Parliament. If I were to tell you, and I'm repeating, members of Parliament will not see these things that you are seeing. Yeah? Members of Parliament will not see this. And I have not seen them, and I'm one of them. I'm one of the members of Parliament. I have not seen it. But once you bring it out, it's very easy to run on with it. Yeah? So we really need you to help pick things out. Help pick them that concern us. And you pick them in time, it's very easy to work with them. The very last closing remark was supposed to come from Senator Kasanga, and I think I had delayed it. And so we end, unless somebody objects. I don't know, in-house staff. Remember gate? South. Should we close minus any information from where we are going next? So, really thank you very much. I think this is a good gesture, particularly meeting a big group of members of the civil society. really want to encourage